Chapter 775. Water System? Giga's interest was piqued. Xiao Xian pointed at the different shaped tributaries. We'll use the tributaries network to divide the tribes. For example, there are 3 large tributaries in the Flaming River Basin. For example, the one closest to us, its tributaries and lakes form a network of water systems. We'll use the water system to divide the tribes, so that it's easier to manage them. Next time, when you mention a tribe, just tell us the water system they're in, and remember what it looks like. That way, we'll be able to identify the tribe easily. Yes, that's it. Giga didn't know how to express his confusion. Now, Xiao Xian's suggestion of dividing the tribes by the water network easily solved Gigu's problem. In the past, if I didn't look at the map, I wouldn't even know where a tribe was when they mentioned it. Even if we need to inform them, we need to have a pattern and order. That way it'll be faster. Plus, more and more tribes are coming to Yanjiao. If more tribes join us in the future, we can continue to add them. There were so many tribes, but now, there were even smaller tribes that lived in seclusion. Although there weren't many people in the Flaming River Basin, there were still many tribes. It was just that most of the tribes didn't occupy large territories, and didn't have many people. Most of them only had a few hundred people. Small tribes needed to stick together to survive. The external threats were getting bigger and bigger. And the competition within the mainland wasn't small either. Most of the tribes living in the Flaming River Basin weren't large. Even if a single tribe could maintain their peace for now, it wouldn't last long. Soon, they would be attacked by all sorts of forces. Before Xiao Xian went to the Lu tribe, he had told the tribesmen to inform the other tribes in the Flaming River region to be wary of outsiders, especially those who came from the other side of the sea. People who came at this time were not here for sightseeing. Even the Chonglis, a group that didn't specialize in robbing, almost made the Flaming Horn suffer losses, let alone those who came with ulterior motives. The Lu tribe was a good example. If the Flaming Horns didn't go there, they would have either been taken away by DNFA, or they would have been slowly divided up by other people with ulterior motives. Now even the Hui tribe and the Tian Shan tribe, who used to hate each other, joined forces to resist the outsiders. Apart from these 2 tribes, no other tribe could take the lead. The Central Plains had already made all sorts of preparations, so there was no need to worry. Flaming River was about to make their move too. This was the question that Gigu had been thinking about all this time. The small tribes in the Flaming River region were already smart enough to look for someone to rely on. They wanted to rely on Yanjiao to survive. At this time, Yanjiao had many things to do. Xiao Xian listened to Gigu's thoughts. Gigu didn't plan to imitate the slave masters on the other side of the sea and establish a kingdom for the time being. The situation in the tribes was more complicated. Many tribes had just merged their fire seeds, or just had the idea of merging their fire seeds. For thousands of years, the tribe's ideology was the most important thing. They wouldn't bow down and obey orders in just a few years. Bloody suppression wasn't a wise idea. The Thousand Masks tribe was able to imitate the Flaming River tribe's rule in the central region, because those tribes had been dependent on them for many years. In the Flaming River region, the tribes had always been independent. Some of them didn't even want to work with other tribes. If it wasn't for the circumstances, they wouldn't have come out of hiding. There's something else, Xian, you might not know, Gigu said. What is it? Xiao Xian asked. I only heard about it when you went to the Lu tribe, Gigu said in a low voice. Slave masters are coming. Slave masters? Xiao Xian was puzzled. If it was just a regular slave master, Gigu wouldn't have specially mentioned it at this time. Literally, those people took the tribesmen away, especially the children who haven't awakened their totemic powers. They sold them to the people on the other side of the sea as slaves. Otherwise, why would those tribes who have been hiding, or didn't want to get close to us be in such a hurry to find us? There weren't many people in the small tribes here, and the children were targeted by outsiders. After all, children who hadn't awakened their totemic powers were easy to deal with, easy to transport and easy to train. How could the tribesmen remain calm when their new blood was taken away? No wonder they were in such a hurry to go to Yanjiao. They were looking for a big helper, because the other tribes in the Flaming River region wouldn't be able to help them. More and more people probably found other ways to cross the sea. They don't need to cross the sea from the desert. They can sail from other places, Xiaoxian said. The longboat tribe had only opened one of the sea routes. Naturally, others could open other routes. The sea route could transport more people. Compared to when the disaster had just ended, there should be a lot more people coming over. On the other hand, the tribesmen were just starting to break free. There were already many mature organizations on the other side of the sea. They worked well together, and these ignorant tribesmen couldn't compare to them. Even if many people realized that their children had been taken away, they couldn't solve the problem in such a short time. They couldn't even reduce the probability of this happening, let alone find them. That's why we need to form an alliance, Gigu said. An alliance of tribes? Xiaoxian already guessed what Gigu was thinking when he found out about Gigu's worries. Dragon Head. Gigu wanted to form an alliance with the other tribes in the Flaming River region. Yinjiao would be the leader of this alliance. That's right. Gigu's eyes burned with passion. Yinjiao still doesn't have enough people. Even if the Taiha tribe, Drumming tribe, and Rain tribe join us, it's still too little. I already had this plan when the trading point was first set up. I just couldn't wait for the right time. Now the chance is here. Yes, some tribes have been influenced by fixed beliefs for a long time. Even if Gigu had a plan, it wouldn't be successful. But now, Yinjiao didn't even have to look for them. They came looking for them on their own. In this crisis, they each looked for a way out. The desire to survive and the development of their tribes forced these people to come out. This was also the first step for the tribesmen who shunned the world and didn't want to interact with other tribes. They had to change in order to survive. But there are many things that need to be done to form an alliance like this. It was rare for Gigu to find someone who could completely understand him. He quickly explained his doubts and troubles. Gigu's troubles could be summed up in one word: order. Nothing could be accomplished without rules. If they followed Gigu's plan to form an alliance, there had to be rules and regulations. They had to let them know the rules of the Flaming River region's alliance. Otherwise, they would think that they would be protected and helped by Yinjiao. Then they would do whatever they wanted. They would fight amongst themselves and fight amongst themselves. If Gigu didn't help them today, he would gloat over their misfortune the next day. That would be a mess. Order. Gigu paused. Yes, we have to make some rules. Since we're here, we have to make some rules. We have to tell them what to do and what not to do. Otherwise, they'll be kicked out of the alliance. Yinjiao wanted to form an alliance to become stronger. At the end of the day, it was for survival and development. It wasn't a charity. In this kind of environment, with the threat from the outside world growing stronger, if they couldn't continue to be strong, they would be defeated one by one. In this place, only the strong were respected. Xiaoxian discussed with Guihe and a few important figures of the tribe for 3 days. Even Zheng Luo, who was guarding the trading point, and Duo Kong, who often stayed at the trading point, were called back. At this time, the trading point was filled with people. The number of foreign tribesmen had increased. Logically speaking, Zheng Luo should be at the trading point every day, but that wasn't the case. All the tribesmen in the trading point had been keeping an eye on the Flaming Horn tribe's movements. They couldn't go to the Flaming Horn headquarters, so they could only observe from the trading point. These few days, they noticed that 2 important figures in the trading point, Zheng Luo and Duo Kong, were acting strangely. Something big is going to happen. EC looked away from the door and sighed. Something big? Will it threaten us? Grasshopper asked carefully. Yinjiao's strength determined their lives. He didn't want anything to happen to Yinjiao. No, it's a good thing. EC was in a good mood. He smiled and said, I'm afraid there's going to be a big change here. A good change. He was right to come here. Grasshopper immediately broke into a big smile. As long as Yinjiao was fine, he was happy. Their life here was much better than when they were on the other side of the sea. As he was thinking, a Yinjiao warrior hurried over and handed a scroll to EC. The head elder gave this to you. After handing the scroll to EC, the warrior hurriedly left and ran towards the Flaming River Castle. EC gave Grasshopper a look. Grasshopper quickly walked to the door and guarded it. He didn't want anyone to have a chance to sneak in and peek at the scroll. After opening the scroll, EC raised his eyebrows. He closed the scroll and said, "Grasshopper, close the door. We have important things to do. This is our chance to prove our worth." Grasshopper's expression immediately turned serious. He was just a follower. His quality of life was closely related to EC. It was obvious that Yinjiao had a mission for EC. If EC completed the mission well, he would definitely be treated well. As a follower, he would naturally have a better life. While EC was completing the mission given to him by the head elder, no one was allowed to come in and disturb them. Anyone who came in and disturbed them would be going against them. Grasshopper's eyes were filled with murderous intent. No one was allowed to come in during this period. He would tear apart anyone who made things difficult for them. Gradually, everyone in the trading point noticed a strange atmosphere. Even some of the tribesmen who had just arrived felt that something was brewing and was about to break out of the ground. They continued to wait anxiously and uneasily. This was because Yinjiao's higher-ups, those above the team leader, had not appeared in the trading point for 3 days straight. They refused to meet with them. While everyone was speculating, Yinjiao announced a big announcement. Yinjiao would establish a great alliance in the Flaming River Valley. They would establish a new order here. Anyone who was willing to follow the new order of the alliance could join the alliance. Yinjiao's current chief, Gigu current shaman, Guizhe, and head elder Xiaoxian jointly issued the first Flaming River Gathering Order. The chiefs of the tribes in the Flaming River Valley, who were willing to follow the new order and join the alliance, could head to the Flaming River Trading Point to participate in the Great Alliance Banquet. The order explained the new order in detail. Yinjiao would naturally play the role of leader in this alliance. Anyone who wasn't willing could step forward and settle it with force. Of course, no one would be stupid enough to step forward at a time like this. The tribesmen who came to the trading point for various reasons hurriedly left the trading point after hearing the contents of the order. They had to inform their own tribes of this important news. Zheng Luo stood on top of the Flaming River Tower as he listened to the reports from the people at the entrance of the trading point. He looked at the figures running quickly in the distance and asked Xiaoxian, "Can the Great Alliance really develop as expected?" "That depends on how many tribes are willing to join," Xiaoxian said as he looked at the animal skin scroll in his hand. Xiaoxian was holding a curved line on the animal skin scroll. That was a section of the Flaming River, which was also the section they knew of so far. On this line, there were no tributaries for the time being. But soon, Xiaoxian believed that there would be more and more lines on this animal skin roll. Just like the roots of a tree, the roots would grow longer and longer, and the branches would grow more and more. The drumming tribe. Abuli looked at the order he had just received and studied it carefully. In the end, he still didn't quite understand it. He knew that the Flaming Horns wanted to gather everyone together, but he couldn't guess the deeper meaning behind it. As for the new order mentioned in the order, he actually didn't have any objections. As long as it didn't harm the tribe's interests, he was willing to accept anything that was beneficial to them. To put it simply, Abuli's current mentality was to cling onto Yinjiao's thick thighs. He wouldn't lose anything anyway, at least after coming into contact with Yinjiao. Their tribe's lives were getting better and better. There was no doubt about that. "I want to go to Yinjiao for the banquet. Who wants to?" Before Abuli could finish, the crowd around him exploded. Me. Bring me along. Chief, look at me. Look at my feet. They're so big. How can you not bring me along?" Abuli saw that many people were already standing upside down and fighting with their feet. He snorted. He still remembered the first time he said he wanted to go to Yinjiao. Many people objected and didn't want to go. But now, they were all so enthusiastic that they even fought with their feet for a spot. At a certain section of the Flaming River, on a mountain some distance away from the Flaming River, a group of people gathered at the entrance of a cave. "Flaming River Basin? Chief, are we part of the Flaming River Basin?" Someone asked anxiously. They just found out that the river was called the Flaming River not long ago, and their tribe wasn't close to the river. He was worried that Yinjiao's Flaming River Basin didn't include their tribe. The person standing at the entrance of the cave carefully held a scroll. His eyes were filled with doubt. After carefully studying the few sentences on the scroll, He comforted himself. The Flaming River Basin doesn't just refer to the main stream. There are tributaries too. We're very close to one of the tributaries, so we should be part of the Flaming River Basin. Yes, we definitely are. Let's pack up and get ready to go to the Flaming River trading point. Who wants to go with me? Me. Me. Chief, I'll go. I'm strong. I can run fast. I haven't been upstream yet. What do the Yinjiao people look like? I don't know. I heard from the people that the Yinjiao people look like fearsome beasts. Really? I want to know how many tribes have joined us. Not many, right? I don't know many tribes either. That's because you don't know. There must be many more. What's with the noise? We'll know when we get there. The chief who shouted carefully put away the scroll in his hand, then turned around and went into the cave to pack his things. He hadn't traveled far for many years, so he was quite nervous. However, the Yinjiao people were right. A small tribe couldn't face the coming attack alone. One of the words, fight the enemy together, was enough to tempt him. Chapter 776. This was the first time Yinjiao publicly announced a gathering of tribes. This time, the tribes in the central region were not included. This was different from the grand banquet when the Flaming River trading point was first established. This gathering would have a huge impact on the Flaming River Basin. All the tribes living in the Flaming River Basin, regardless of whether they were willing to join the Great Alliance or not, would not be able to change the current situation. The Flaming River Basin was about to undergo a huge change. Some people were happy while others were worried. The people in Yinjiao, especially the higher-ups, had not slept well for the past few days. What could they do? They were under a lot of pressure. If only a few tribes were willing to join the gathering, wouldn't that be embarrassing? That was why everyone, including Gigu, was worried. Only Xiaoxian was still doing what he was supposed to do. Boss, how many tribes do you think will come? Duokong stood at the top of the Flaming River Tower, the tallest building in the trading point. He stood under the flag with the Yinjiao totem on it, and looked at the sparsely populated trading point. He could not hide his nervousness. Zheng Luo sighed and looked outside the trading point. I don't know. At least 10? Duokong counted with his fingers. The Rain tribe, the Taiha tribe, the Drumming tribe, and the Lu tribe, who had just arrived, would definitely not refuse to join the alliance. As for the Pu tribe, the Drumming tribe, the Ya tribe, the Drumming tribe, and the others, Duokong didn't know much about them. There were also tribes further away, and those who came from Minghai. They had no choice but to come to Yinjiao for the first time. Even if many of them were unwilling, there should be at least 1 or 2 tribes who were willing to join the Great Alliance, right? 10 there should be. Duokong encouraged himself in his heart. After convincing himself, he felt a little more confident. When they first learned of Gui He and Xiaoxian's plan, they were also quite surprised. The scenario that Xiaoxian described was what they wanted to see. But after all, it was just a fantasy that had yet to happen. As for the outcome, they could only wait and see. We haven't heard the horn today. Zheng Luo looked at the setting sun and sighed. It's still early. It should sound in a few days, Duokong said hesitantly. After leaving the Flaming River Tower, Zheng Luo walked out of the trading point. There were 3 gates to the trading point. After the order was issued, one of the gates was remodeled and became the largest of the 3 gates. The 2 sides of the door were built with huge stones, which were then carved into the shape of 2 huge beast heads. The ratio was almost 1-to-1. Of these 2 types of dire beasts, one was a carnivorous giant dire beast, and the other was a herbivorous giant dire beast. The former had the sharp fangs of the carnivorous dire beasts, while the latter had some huge hard horns. They were both among the top dire beasts in the forest, and were not easy to hunt. Every time such dire beasts were hunted, it required a planned encirclement and teamwork. This time, when they remodeled the gates to the trading point, they made the design of 2 dire beasts. Although the dire beasts' heads were carved out of stone, the fangs and horns embedded in the statues were genuine. They were the treasures the tribe had collected over the years. This time, they used them to build the walls. The carvings of the 2 dire beasts' heads were not very detailed. Many parts were not smooth and had a rough feel, but it was enough to let people see the general shape of the 2 dire beasts' heads. Also, because it was not detailed enough, the rough parts added a rough, wild and mysterious feeling to the statues. The stones used to make the dire beasts' heads were above average. This time, Yin Jiao had invested a lot. It was no wonder that Zheng Luo and the rest were nervous and felt pressured. This gate was the largest gate in the trading point, and it was also the gate that Yin Jiao had invested the most. The Yin Jiao people called this gate the Beast Head Gate. The horn that Zheng Luo mentioned before was the horn that was placed in the two dire beasts' heads. If the people guarding this gate discovered that a tribe had responded to the summons, they would blow the horn to let others know that a tribe had arrived. Unfortunately, they had not heard a single sound of the horn. The drumming tribe, Taiha tribe, Rain tribe and Lu tribe didn't come immediately, because they were very close to the Flaming Horn tribe. When the Flaming Horn tribe said the feast would start, they would come immediately. They had already made their stance clear. It didn't matter if they came early or late. That was why the Flaming Horn tribe was mainly waiting for the tribes that were further away. Looking at the Beast Head Gate, Zheng Luo asked the guards, "Have you seen the Grand Elder?" "I think he's over there." A guard pointed in a direction. Zheng Luo walked in that direction. That was where the King's Stoneworm used to live. Yin Jiao had claimed the land, but had not started construction yet. Their original plan was to expand the trading point and connect it to the other side. However, they did not have enough people. Now that the trading point was big enough to accommodate everyone here, they did not need the other side. When Zheng Luo saw Xiao Xian was sitting in the stone forest. He was holding an animal skin scroll and drawing something on it. Zheng Luo went over to take a look, but did not understand. "What are you drawing?" asked Zheng Luo. "A design." Xiao Xian put down the pen in his hand and moved his stiff neck. He had been sitting here for a whole day. "A design? You plan to expand the trading point?" Zheng Luo was shocked. If it wasn't for expansion, what was the point of drawing a design? "Maybe it's time to expand." Xiao Xian stood up from a rock. "But you said before that we don't have many people. We don't need this place for now." "There will be more soon," said Xiao Xian. Zheng Luo understood what Xiao Xian meant by, "There will be more soon." "You're so optimistic about this gathering?" Seeing Xiao Xian's calm demeanor, Zheng Luo felt a little more confident. Originally, he came to Xiao Xian to ask Xiao Xian to use not divination, but now it seemed that there was no need. Xiao Xian had already expressed his opinion. After thinking it through, Zheng Luo felt the pressure on him lessen. Since Xiao Xian was so confident, he would wait a little longer. Xiao Xian was optimistic about this gathering, because of his intuition, and because he had already sent the people to spread the news. Most of the tribes in the Flaming River region didn't like foreign tribesmen, but they didn't have enough power. They hadn't come up with a plan yet, because of the lack of information. What Xiao Xian asked the tribesmen to deliver wasn't just a message, but also a message to let them know that the invaders were stronger and more ambitious. There were a lot of them too. Small tribes had to unite to have a better chance of survival. The Flaming Horns tribe was like a core, and the other tribes gathered around this core. If it weren't for the foreshadowing and the threat of the foreign tribesmen, Xiao Xian didn't know how the other tribes would react. What was done was done. All that was left was to wait. At the trading point, after Zheng Luo left, the Yinjiao warriors guarding the Beast Head Gate were also discussing and guessing how many people would come. Every time the horn sounded, a tribe would come. That was why even if they weren't on duty, they could still hear the horn. "How many tribes do you think will come?" "5. Bullshit. There are already 4 tribes around here. It's definitely more than 5. 7. 9. I'm guessing 10. I'm guessing 20. Definitely not 20. I'm guessing 15. The Yinjiao tribesmen weren't the only ones discussing this. The expedition teams that came to the Flaming River trading point were also discussing this. Many of them had already completed their trade and should have left long ago. Who knew that Yinjiao would send out a call to form an alliance? When they heard this, their curiosity was piqued, and they decided to stay for a few more days to see how effective Yinjiao's call would be. Many of them wanted to make fun of themselves. Of course, most of them wanted to join in the fun. "Let's bet. Let's guess how many tribes will come." "I'm betting under 10. I'm betting under 10 too. I'm betting on Yinjiao. I'm betting under 15. I'm betting 20. 20? Are you crazy? I think Yinjiao is so strong. There will definitely be many tribes coming. The person who bet 20 had a serious expression on his face and said confidently, Bootlicker. The others cursed in their hearts. He knew that there were Yinjiao tribesmen watching him, so he said that on purpose. If not, why would he only bet 1 beast tooth? If he was so confident, why didn't he bet 10 beast teeth and 20 beast hides? The outsiders and Yinjiao tribesmen who stayed in the trading point were all ears, waiting for the horn to sound. Unfortunately, the horn didn't sound for a few days. However, some tribes were far away, so they wouldn't be able to get here so quickly. Plus, this was a big deal, so they had to discuss it. But as the days passed, the horn still remained silent. It wasn't until the 7th day that the drumming tribe arrived that the horn sounded for the first time. Then, on the 10th day, the chief of the Ya tribe brought 100 Ya tribesmen out of the underground tunnel and entered the trading point. The horn sounded for the 2nd time. On the 15th day, the drumming tribe and Jing tribe arrived at the trading point together. The horn at the two-headed beast gate sounded twice. After the 15th day, the horn sounded more frequently in the following days. Not only would it sound every day, but it would also sound several times in a row. After all, some of the smaller tribes were already in contact with each other, so it was safer to travel together. There were more tribes in the Flaming River Basin. The number of tribes that were willing to follow the new order and join the Great Alliance continued to increase. Perhaps some were still observing, but some had already started to take action. On this day, Xiaoxian walked out of the stone forest. The man-made river that was dug out surrounded the stone forest and the trading point. This river not only solved the problem of ships not being able to pass through the Flaming River Bridge, but it also formed a line of defense. Every day before the sky turned dark, the suspension bridge would be closed to stop people from entering this area. Therefore, if anyone needed to cross the river, they had to do it before the sun rose. When Xiaoxian walked across the river from the suspension bridge, he saw some greenish-black figures with protruding bones on the surface of the river. The water rippled as the figures swam. These were the fish that the Dishan tribe gave to Xiaoxian. After Xiaoxian threw them into the river, he didn't care about them anymore. He left the trading point and went to the Lu tribe. When he came back, these fish were already as long as an arm. Their growth speed was astonishing. According to the patrolling warriors, the pterosaur had been feeding these fish, and it was still doing so. Xiaoxian didn't know what the pterosaur wanted to do, but as long as it didn't want to eat the fish, it was fine. He could help raise the fish. Woo! The low sound of the horn pierced through the clouds and reverberated throughout the forest. Xiaoxian looked towards the trading point. Another tribe had arrived at the trading point. They didn't use the suspension bridge, so they must have come directly from the Flaming River using boats. More and more tribes arrived over the past few days. Zheng Luo and the rest felt more at ease. There were already more than 10 tribes here, which was more than they expected. Now they just had to continue waiting. The tribes further away might need a few more days to arrive. Xiaoxian didn't look at the trading point again. After he left the river, he walked around and observed the terrain. He wanted to see if he needed to add more defensive measures. We should cut down some trees. It'll block the view of the people on the other side of the river. As he thought, Xiaoxian suddenly stopped and looked towards the forest not far away. There were people coming over. There were quite a few of them. Rustle. The sound of their bodies brushing against the branches and grass wasn't loud. It was obvious that the other party had purposely held back and was very cautious. Thud, thud, thud. There was the sound of hard objects hitting each other. It sounded like some kind of bone ornament. Xiaoxian stood there without moving. He didn't try to hide himself either. The other party must have noticed him. That was why the person walking in front paused for a moment. Soon the people walked out from the forest. Their clothes were mainly made of animal skin, and there were many bone ornaments. Especially the leader. He had a lot of animal teeth and bone ornaments hanging from his head to his feet. According to the habits of most tribesmen, this should be considered a grand dress. Xiaoxian looked at the people in the group. They were all young and strong, all totemic warriors. Regardless of gender, They all had a sharp aura around them. This was a tribe that was good at fighting. Who are you? One of the people in the group took 2 steps forward and stared at Xiao Xian cautiously. The leader only turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes casually sweeping across the group, stopping the others who were about to speak. His arms seemed to be raised casually, but it was like a city wall, stopping the people in the group who were about to step forward. A traveler? Or a tribesman who answered the summons? The leader asked in a deep voice. Xiao Xian was about to answer when he frowned and turned to look in another direction. Someone else was coming. Bang! The person who asked the question just now stepped on the ground, and his aura increased. His animal skin clothes flapped in the wind. Originally, the clothes were loose, but with the appearance of the totem patterns and the continuous increase of the totem power, his body swelled, and the animal skin clothes became tight. When he waved his arms, the airflow made a whooshing sound, like the whistling of the winter wind, biting cold and full of a murderous aura. After that person, the others in the group also activated their totemic power and looked in the same direction cautiously. Soon, another group of people appeared in that direction. The person walking in front looked at the group not far away and sneered. Thunder Mountain Tribe? I didn't expect you to come too. Drumming Tribe? What are you doing here? The Thunder Mountain Chief's tone was very bad. It was obvious that the relationship between the two parties wasn't very good. Same as you, of course. The drumming chief's eyes flashed coldly. Xiao Xian, who was standing there, was ignored by both sides. Chapter 777. Without waiting for Xiao Xian to ask anything, the two sides were already prepared to fight, with the leaders of both sides taking the lead. Less than half a minute had passed since the two sides had met. The first team that appeared emitted a fierce hostility. With the eruption of their totemic power, their momentum instantly rose like a frenzied beast. The leader's totemic power was circulating at a high speed. Under the continuous eruption, his momentum burst forth again. His arm, which had already grown thicker, seemed to be inflated again. In the blink of an eye, it doubled in size. He did not grow any taller, but he looked like a powerful beast. His arms were so thick that even EC's half-beast slaves might not be able to compare to them. His fist, which was much larger than a normal person's, rumbled like thunder. The wind from his fist made the bone ornaments on the man's body crackle, as if a thunderstorm was about to descend after a muffled thunder. If this punch landed, even a mountain rock would be blown apart. If a normal person was hit by this punch, even if they did not die, they would lose half of their life. The second team that appeared did not show a trace of surprise or fear in the face of such a ferocious battle formation. They seemed to have expected this, and their fighting spirit rose. Their bodies did not look as strong as their opponents. At this time, their opponents had changed because of their totemic power. One of them could fit 2 or 3 of them. However, they did not rely on their strong bodies, but on the sharp weapons in their hands. Horns, bones, or stone tools were polished into curved knives. Some were even directly connected to handles of different lengths. There were still traces of blood on the edges of the blades that had not yet dried up. These were the traces left behind by the trouble they had dealt with on their way here. The leader of the second team held a scimitar polished from a beast's tooth. He rushed out like lightning, his body suddenly bouncing up, with a kind of domineering momentum. The scimitar in his hand was like a fierce beast opening its fangs, rushing towards the leader of the other team. The strong wind that was stirred up carried a sense of ruthlessness. When their leaders started fighting, the people in both teams also rushed out after them. The nearby flocks of birds flew away in fright, and the falling leaves were blown away by the wind. The battle was about to start. Xiao Xian looked at the scene in front of him. He didn't expect the two sides to start fighting so soon. Did they not know where they were? Although this place wasn't within Yinjiao's territory, it wasn't too far away. If a fight really broke out, it would definitely cause quite a commotion. Yinjiao had just sent out the order, and the League of Legends hadn't been established yet. If the people who came over started fighting before they even entered the trading area, what would the people who were waiting to see a joke think? Perhaps he would gloat even more. Look, those tribesmen start fighting as soon as they see each other. Is this how the Great Alliance is? Could it be built? What would the tribes that responded to the summons think when faced with such a situation? He didn't have time to think too much. The totem power burst out from his body. Xiaoxian's figure flashed and disappeared. Originally, in this area, at this time, the people with the strongest aura were naturally the leaders of both teams. But just as they were about to start fighting, an even stronger and fiercer aura suddenly rose. It was as if a hurricane had suddenly raised an even higher wave in the middle of the sea. It directly suppressed the strong aura from before. This sudden aura was like a giant beast deep in the mountains. It forcibly broke the atmosphere created by the two of them. In the air, the turbulent air currents collided with each other, creating a series of explosions. Countless waves of air blasted outwards. Bang! The muffled sound of the collision was sharp and piercing to the ears. The man with bone ornaments all over his body had a huge fist that could shatter mountains, but it was blocked by a palm. It was as if he had met a huge mountain. He couldn't move forward. He looked at the palm that blocked his fist, and saw an arm covered with totem patterns. The totem patterns seemed to have a life of their own as they flowed. Among the flame-like patterns, there were some crimson flames coming out of them. Streams of air that could be seen with the naked eye erupted from the pores of the arm. It was as if the blood in the arm, under the skin, was being boiled by the flames. The surrounding temperature was also raised. The flames around the arm were like fire snakes moving at high speed, tearing apart the aura they had accumulated. On the other side, the beast tooth knife that was supposed to strike was blocked by a metal weapon that flashed with cold light. The ear-piercing sound just now was the sound of the beast tooth knife scraping against the body of the knife. Xiaoxian didn't care what the two of them were thinking. After blocking both sides, his body flashed. His feet didn't move from the spot. Then, without any rest, he shook his shoulders and used his strength to shake out his arms. Chi! Whether it was the man with the beast tooth knife or the man with the bone ornaments, they all felt as if they had been hit by a ferocious beast head-on. The strong force pushed them out. Their feet dug up the grass on the ground, creating a ditch that was more than 10 meters long. If it weren't for the others holding on to them, the ditch would have been even longer. The man with the bone ornaments pushed away the person who was holding him. He felt pain all over his body. The blood in his chest was boiling, as if he had just been hit with a sledgehammer. He could even smell the sweet smell of blood when he breathed, especially the arm that had just been thrown out. Other than the pain, he couldn't feel anything else. He had temporarily lost all feeling. However, he couldn't care less about the injury on his arm. He looked at the person who had suddenly appeared in front of him in shock. The man with the beast tooth knife who had been bounced away wasn't any better. His arms and legs were still numb, especially after the shock. His whole body felt like it was going to fall apart. There was a scorching heat under his palm. The place that was pressed against the beast tooth knife was burning with pain. No one knew better than him how much strength he had put into that strike. Even so, it was still easily blocked. The high temperature caused by the friction between the knife and the metal object in the man's hand told him that everything that had just happened wasn't an illusion. His heart was in turmoil because of the sudden accident. He stared at Xiaoxian with his eyes wide open, but he couldn't say a word. Who was this person? Everyone who had seen what had just happened was shocked. They were frozen in their attacking positions. They had thought that it was just an insignificant person. They hadn't expected such a thing to happen. They knew very well how powerful their leader was. Even so, not only had his attack been blocked, but he had also been forcefully pushed away. Looking at the ditch on the ground where the grass had been shoveled away, and then looking at the person who was standing there unharmed, everyone felt a chill run down their spine. They were terrified. Who are you? The man with the bone ornaments asked doubtfully. Yinjiao. The drumming chief didn't blink. The shock in his eyes was gone, and there was no anger. Instead, there was a trace of excitement. Yinjiao. Hearing the drumming chief's words, the others were shocked. They carefully looked at Xiaoxian. They had thought that he was just an insignificant passerby, so they didn't pay much attention to him. Now that they knew he was a Yinjiao man, they naturally had to take a closer look. This was a Yinjiao man? Why was he so different from what they knew? Didn't they say that Yinjiao people looked like fearsome beasts? That wasn't right. Perhaps Yinjiao people didn't look like fearsome beasts, but were more like fearsome beasts in other aspects. They could tell that just by looking at how he had blocked the two leaders. Were Yinjiao people really that strong? Xiao Xian withdrew his hand. Seeing that both sides had calmed down, he calmed the totemic power in his body. The totemic patterns dissipated, and the flames around his body disappeared. Yinjiao Xiao Xian. Who are you? Xiao Xian looked at the two groups of people. They had totemic patterns on their bodies that represented their tribes. However, Xiao Xian had never seen these two totemic patterns before. In other words, it was very likely that these two tribes were here for the first time. The drumming chief quickly shook his hands behind his back to get rid of the numbness from before. His gloomy face revealed a surprised smile. You're Xiao Xian? Yinjiao's great elder Xiao Xian. Great elder? The Thunder Mountain chief looked at Xiao Xian. He had regained some feeling in his arms, but the pain from before was still clear. You're Yinjiao's great elder? The Thunder Mountain chief asked again in disbelief. Even the other Thunder Mountain tribesmen behind him opened their mouths wide. That's right, I am. Xiao Xian nodded, then looked at the two leaders of the two groups. The leader of the drumming tribe reacted quickly. He sheathed his scimitar and walked towards Xiao Xian. The drumming tribe's chief, Si has answered the summons with the drumming tribe. Si eyes shone with excitement. He treated different people differently. If the person he was facing was weak, he would never treat them so warmly. Plus, they were here for the Yinjiao tribe. He was relieved that he didn't do anything to offend this person. As expected, a tribe that had the guts to send out a summons was very powerful. He had heard of this grand elder from the tribesmen. The tribesmen once told him that it was fine if he didn't remember the other Flaming Horn's names. But he had to remember Xiao Xian's name. Si looked at the stunned Thunder Mountain tribesmen and sneered in his heart. As expected, they were a bunch of brainless idiots. He remembered that when they arrived, the atmosphere between the Thunder Mountain tribesmen and Yinjiao's great elder wasn't very good. They answered the summons, but didn't gather any information. They didn't even know who this person was, let alone answer the summons. The leader of the Thunder Mountain tribesmen came back to his senses. He calmed himself down and said, the Thunder Mountain tribe's chief, Lu Zhai, has answered the summons with the Thunder Mountain tribesmen. The drumming tribe and the Thunder Mountain tribe? Xiao Xian looked at the two groups. Both sides only brought about 100 people. Xiao Xian's gaze made the Thunder Mountain tribesmen's hearts skip a beat. They were afraid that this person would hold a grudge against them because of their bad attitude. They heard that many large tribes would start a fight without saying anything. However, Xiao Xian's next words made them heave a sigh of relief. The sun has already set, and the drums have already sounded once. When the drums sound for the third time, the sky will be dark. Then, you won't be able to cross the river or enter the trading point tonight. Xiao Xian pointed in a direction. Head this way, and you'll see a suspension bridge. You can cross the river from there. As he spoke, a few muffled drum beats that sounded like the roars of wild beasts sounded again. This was the second time. Si originally wanted to chat with this Yinjiao's great elder a little longer, but now he had no choice but to stop talking. Their journey was more important. They didn't want to spend the night here. They didn't know how many people were watching them. This was their first time in Yinjiao's territory, so they weren't familiar with the roads. However, Xiao Xian had already pointed them in the right direction. They just had to walk in that direction. Thank you. After Si thanked him, he didn't waste any more time, and quickly led his men in that direction. The Thunder Mountain tribesmen didn't want to be left behind. After thanking Xiao Xian, Si led his men and chased after them. On the way, Si thought about many things. When they first heard Yinjiao's order to gather all the tribes, their first thought was, of course, dissatisfaction. They agreed to unite all the tribes to fight against the invaders, but they had different opinions about who should be the leader. Before this, they only knew about Yinjiao from the tribesmen and the nearby tribes. Their understanding of Yinjiao was too vague. Since the tribesmen always liked to exaggerate, they would always try to suppress what they heard. They always thought that the tribesmen were exaggerating, but what happened just now proved that the tribesmen were telling the truth. Even if not all of the tribesmen's stories were accurate, most of them were true. However, Yinjiao's great elder was really surprising. When the drum beat sounded for the third time in the Flaming River trading point, the suspension bridge at the man-made river was retracted. The Thunder Mountain and Ji tribesmen had already crossed the bridge. "Chief, was that really Yinjiao's great elder?" someone asked from the Thunder Mountain tribesmen. "Who else do you think it was?" Xiaidu asked. "It has to be. Not just anyone can block your punch. It has to be Yinjiao's great elder. It has to be." "No, I'm not talking about his strength. I can't deny that he's very strong, but an elder, or a great elder. Yinjiao's great elder is actually a young man. He looks younger than me," said a young man in the group. He was considered one of the more outstanding members of the younger generation in the tribe, but he still couldn't compare to the chief. However, that person just now easily blocked the chief's attack. Even if the chief didn't use his full strength, not just anyone could block that punch, let alone take it head-on. The chief was even sent flying. Let's not talk about Yinjiao's great elder. What do you think about the Yinjiao guards at the suspension bridge? Xiaidu asked. Even though those guards aren't as strong as Yinjiao's great elder, they don't look weak either. I heard they hunt fearsome beasts for a living. Difference. This was the first time they realized the difference between them and the Yinjiao tribe. The Thunder Mountain tribesmen weren't the only ones who thought this way. The Ji tribesmen felt the same way too, but Xiaidu was a little more thoughtful. He reminded the people in the group what to say when they entered the trading point, and what to keep to themselves. Needless to say, Xiaoxian's appearance scared Xiaidu out of his wits. After the Flaming River trading point's drum sounded for the third time, the people in the trading point were ready to rest. The sun had completely set and night had arrived. They gathered in groups of 3 to 5 to discuss the tribes that had answered the call today. After that, they went back to their own places, thinking about how many tribes would come tomorrow. There were already 18 tribes. No one expected so many tribes to answer the summons. Even if they didn't think highly of some of the tribes, they were still tribes. One tribe wasn't good enough, but many of them were still impressive. At the trading point, at the entrance of the Beast Head Gate, under the guidance of the guards, the drumming tribesmen who arrived first came to a 2-meter-tall and 10-meter-long stone tablet. There were some words and pictures on the tablet. These were the names and totems of the tribes that had answered the summons. There were also the signatures of the people who had written these words. All of them were the names of the chiefs of these tribes. Xiaidu had never heard of many of these tribes, and had never seen their totems before. He didn't know there were so many tribes living by the Flaming River. Perhaps he didn't remember the names, but he still remembered the totems. Tribesmen had a deeper memory of totems than tribe names, so they were sure they had never heard of or seen half of these tribes. Taking the paint and pen from the guard, Xingdu drew the totem of the drumming tribe at the position of the 19th square on the stone tablet, and wrote the word drumming on it seriously. He felt that other than the time he took over as chief, this was the second time he had to draw and write so seriously. He was sweating profusely after he finished writing each word. After the totem and tribe names, Xiaidu took a deep breath and wrote his own name, then pressed a palm print on the tablet. Looking at the words in palm print, Xiaidu felt that his arm was still numb from being blocked by the Yinjiao Grand Elder. He wasn't in a good state, so he wasn't satisfied with his drawing. "Can I rewrite it?" Xiaidu asked. The Yinjiao warrior beside him was about to say something, but another voice interrupted. "Of course not. Get out of my way." Lu Zhai, the chief of the Thunder Mountain tribe, came over and pushed Xiaidu to the side. He took another brush from the Yinjiao guard. Xiaidu took a deep breath. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't dare to do anything in Yinjiao territory, he would definitely fight with Lu Zhai for his actions. However, after Lu Zhai finished writing, Xiaidu's mood improved a lot. Not to mention the fact that the Thunder Mountain tribe was ranked behind the drumming tribe. Even Lu Zhai's writing wasn't as good as his. Although Lu Zhai looked serious, his hands were trembling from nervousness. His writing wasn't up to standard. It was fine when he was writing his tribe's name, but when he was writing his own name, his hand trembled and the lines that should have been smooth became wavy. Lu Zhai was speechless. Xiaidu tried his best to hold back his laughter. If it wasn't for the fact that this place wasn't suitable, he would have laughed loudly. Idiot, you can't even write properly. What are you going to use to compete with me? In this aspect, the drumming tribe was still better. Lu Zhai looked at the words on the tablet, and his expression changed. He asked the Yinjiao guard with a stiff face, "Can I rewrite it?" "No. Remember what you said just now." Xiaidu took the brush from Lu Zhai's hand and handed it to the Yinjiao guard. Woo woo! The horn of the beast head gate sounded. The people in the trading point were already preparing to rest, but they didn't expect to hear the horn again. One by one, the travelers got up from their beds and opened their windows to look outside. It's the horn of the beast head gate. That's right. It's from that side. They had been hearing the horn every day recently, so they naturally recognized the horn of the beast head gate. 19 tribe. I don't know which tribe it is. Quick. Let's go to the main street. Before they could make a move, another bugle horn was blown. Whoa, it sounded again. It's another 2 tribes in a row. 20 tribes. Ha 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 ha. I won my bet. I won. The traveler who had bet 20 laughed loudly. You're celebrating too early. It's not over yet. There will definitely be more tribes coming tomorrow. If there are more than 20 tribes, you'll lose just like us. I didn't expect so many tribes to come. I wonder if the tribes coming this time are weak. Quick. Let's go to the main street, or there won't be any seats left. After entering the trading point from the beast head gate, Xiaidu and his group saw a clean and spacious road that had been smoothed out. Beside the road, there were many stone pillars with a water moon stone placed on top of each pillar. After the sun had set, the water moon stone shone brightly, illuminating the entire street like a white rope that led from the beast head gate all the way to the Flaming River Castle. Is this the legendary Flaming River trading point? The people in the group were shocked by everything they saw, from the houses to the decorations. However, they didn't have time to admire the tall houses on both sides of the main street. The crowd that had gathered to watch the show had already made them nervous. People in the houses opened their windows and looked out. There was even a child leaning against the window, looking out curiously. Some people also gathered on the roof. So many people. The number of people on both sides of the street was already more than the total number of people in their tribe. Xiaidu gripped his beast tooth knife tightly. He really wanted to kill someone. If they were outside, there would definitely be a fight to the death if so many people approached them. However, it was different now. The guards of the Flaming Horn tribe had already told them that large-scale fights were not allowed in the trading point. Also, as long as these tribes who were summoned walked on this street, the Flaming Horn tribe would not allow anyone to attack them. They looked at the people on both sides of the street. Although they were all looking at them with different intentions, no matter if it was good or bad, no one stepped onto this flat road. Hey, over there, which tribe are you from? Yeah, which tribe are you from? The people who were watching the show asked. 2 short and fat figures squeezed out from the crowd. Their large faces squinted, and their beards that covered most of their faces twitched. It's the drumming tribe. I can smell them. One of them said. There's also the Thunder Mountain tribe. That earthy smell is definitely from the Thunder Mountain tribe. The other person shouted. They're here too. Quick, tell the chief that the drumming tribe and Thunder Mountain tribe are here. The 2 short and fat figures quickly disappeared from the crowd. One of them instinctively dug into the ground, but after a while, he realized that this was Yin Jiao's territory, and he was not allowed to dig. So he got up and continued running. Drumming tribe? Thunder Mountain tribe? I've never heard of them, someone said. I've never heard of them either, but these 2 tribes seem more difficult to deal with than the tribes that came today. They have a lot of blood on them. There are already 20 tribes. I wonder if there will be 30 in a few days. Sigh. I really want to persuade our chief to move to the Flaming River Basin. The Great Alliance. I plan to go back and talk to our chief. If we want to move, why don't we move to the Flaming River Basin? The Flaming River Basin is still big anyway. We can still join the Great Alliance. Yes, that's what I think too. Humans were social animals. Under the influence of the atmosphere, there was always a herd mentality. No matter what they thought or said when they first heard Yin Jiao's order, They were now starting to acknowledge Yin Jiao's great alliance. They even wanted to join it. This situation made both the Yin Jiao people and the tribes that came to the trading point to choose to join the Great Alliance. Chapter 778. After the Drumming Tribe and Thunder Mountain Tribe arrived, more tribes arrived every day. 21, 22, 25, 26. It was only until the 30th tribe arrived that there was a day where no one arrived. By now, 37 days had passed since the gathering order was sent out, and the 30th tribe had arrived. Looks like we can start the gathering now. Zheng Luo stood on the rooftop of the Flaming River Tower and looked at the people walking around the trading point. He had told Xiao Xian that the space in the trading point was enough, but now it seemed like it wasn't. This was the first time the gathering order was sent out. So many tribes were still observing. They only sent people to the trading point to observe the situation. They didn't plan to come. But in a year or two, it would be hard to say. There really wasn't enough space in the trading point. The 30 tribes had already settled down in 30 houses in the trading point. Occasionally, there would be conflicts, but the trading point had its own rules. The prerequisite for joining the Great Alliance was to follow the new rules. If a fight broke out in the trading point, then sorry, Yinjiao's patrols in the trading point would forcefully throw people out. After some discussion, Yinjiao decided to hold the gathering at the Flaming River Castle on the 40th day, after the gathering order was sent out. 3 days before the gathering, 2 more tribes arrived at the trading point. They were too far away, and had never traveled such a long distance before, so they took a long time to arrive. Woo! A long horn sounded in the trading point. It wasn't the same horn as the one at the Beast Head Gate. Compared to that, this horn was louder and lasted longer. This was the sound of the horn from the rooftop of the Flaming River Tower, telling everyone that the gathering was about to begin. An area in the trading point had already been cleared out when the gathering order was sent out. It was reserved for the tribesmen who answered the call. At this moment, after the horn sounded, people came out from the courtyards one after another, blocking the entire street. Teams with different attire patterns, height, weight, and weight began to gather amidst the unique shouts and shouts. "We're leaving." Lu Zhai, the chief of the Thunder Mountain tribe, looked at the Flaming River Tower, then turned around and shouted into the courtyard. In the few days that they had been here, they had already figured out the way of life and the rules here. As long as they followed the rules, there would not be any major problems. The people and things here gave them a great shock. Everything in the trading zone told them that the Yinjiao people lived very well. Not to mention their strength, just the material standard of living far exceeded theirs. They didn't starve or suffer from the cold. He tidied up the bone ornaments on his body. Some of the bone ornaments were beast fangs, beast claws, and some were made from a strangely shaped bone from a ferocious beast. It could be said that these bone ornaments were the wearer's metals. Before he came here, Lu Zhai was still very confident. However, when he really entered the trading area and saw the fierce beast meat, beast fangs, and beast bones being sold, he really felt the difference. Even if Lu Zhai was confident in his own strength and the people in his tribe, wild beasts could not be compared to fearsome beasts. If possible, they would try to hunt more fearsome beasts. Looking at the animal teeth worn by the Yinjiao people, and then looking at the animal teeth on his body, he felt ashamed. When they arrived at the Beast Tooth Gate, this feeling of shame intensified. Lu Zhai wanted nothing more than to throw away all the bone ornaments on his body. Although he had seen the beast tooth of the Beast Tooth Gate on the second day he arrived at the trading point, he was not as embarrassed as he was now. There seemed to be many pairs of eyes looking at him from the front and back of the tribe. He could feel it even without looking at the Lu village. Although he was embarrassed, he still maintained a serious expression on his face. Taking a deep breath, Lu Zhai made a decision in his heart. Behind Lu Zhai, the other Thunder Mountain tribesmen, who came with Lu Zhai, paused for a few seconds at the Flaming River Castle's Beast Tooth Gate. If it wasn't for the people urging them from behind, they would have gone over to take a closer look at those giant beast teeth. They even wanted to touch them. It wasn't just jealousy or envy, it was a thirst for power. More than 30 tribes walked towards the Flaming River Castle after the horn sounded. Along the way, Some tribes almost started fighting over who should go first. They couldn't fight here, so they had to compete with their aura. Those who lost would obediently scram to the back. Yinjiao wouldn't care about this kind of competition. Therefore, those who were good at fighting and looked strong won priority, such as the Thunder Mountain tribe, the Drumming tribe, and the Water Tiger tribe. Those who were more timid were naturally pushed to the back, such as the Drumming tribe, the Zudong tribe, and the others. The travelers in the trading point all climbed up to the roofs and craned their necks to look over. Seeing these groups walking towards the Flaming River Castle, they all wanted to follow in. Indeed, there were some who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to sneak in. But before they could even get close to the Flaming River Castle, they were discovered by a few tribes. They immediately surrounded them and beat them up. If they weren't worried about violating the rules of the Flaming River Castle, they would have already killed them. However, even if the person who tried to sneak in didn't die, he was beaten half to death, and then thrown out like a sandbag. When the last tribe entered the Flaming River Castle, the thick stone door at the Beast Tooth Gate made a rumbling sound as it rubbed against the ground. Then with a bang it closed, cutting off the view of the people outside. The Flaming River Castle was the tallest building in the Flaming River trading point, so those who wanted to watch from the roofs could only give up. The chiefs or shamans of the 32 tribes brought different numbers of people, and even if they brought more people, they couldn't bring all of them into the Flaming River Castle. After all, there was limited space inside the Flaming River Castle. Therefore, other than the people who followed in, the rest of the people all stood guard outside the Flaming River Castle. Therefore, after the Beast Tooth Gate closed, other than the Yinjiao patrolling guards outside the Flaming River Castle, the tribesmen who didn't follow in all stood guard. Each tribe was responsible for one direction, and a few tribes seemed to have discussed this beforehand. They stood a certain distance away from each other and guarded their own area. When the others saw this, they followed suit. In the end, these people formed a circle around the Flaming River Castle and also separated the people who were watching from the trading point. This made the people who were watching from the sidelines unhappy. Damn it, how can we eavesdrop from so far away? Their curiosity was like a cat's paw gently scratching their hearts. It was very itchy, but they couldn't do anything about it. They didn't belong to the Flaming River Alliance. While the people outside were discussing, the Flaming River Castle had already been divided into 32 areas. However, the seating arrangements were arbitrary. Yinjiao only guaranteed that every tribe had a place to sit. Other than the Drumming tribe, the Rain tribe, the Taiha tribe, and the Drumming tribe, the other tribes had to find their own seats. The Drumming tribe, who were squeezed behind the group and had just entered the Beast Tooth Gate, straightened their backs. Look, their Drumming tribe had already booked their own seats, unlike the other tribes who had to find their own seats. As expected, this was the advantage of riding on someone's coattails in advance. They could enjoy some benefits. Gigu, Zhengluo, and the others looked at the tribes who came in. Some of these people had already started to work together and formed small groups, while others were still working alone. From these people's actions, they could roughly understand them. Which people were more aggressive, which people were more conservative, and which people were more sly. These could all be seen from their actions. When everyone who came in found their seats, they couldn't help but sigh as they looked at the different types of people inside. This is the Great Alliance. So many tribes. At first, they were still wary of the Flaming Horn tribe, worried that the Flaming Horn tribe would trap them here and destroy them. However, when they saw so many tribes here, including some that they were acquainted with, their worries gradually dissipated. Instead, they were filled with anticipation. The Great Alliance. So many tribes, were they really going to unite? If that was really the case, it would indeed be a good thing for everyone. As they sighed, some people memorized every tribe they saw. Soon, they realized that one of the 32 seats was empty. Didn't they say there were 32? Yeah, I remember that we were the last one. I even counted on the stone tablet at the entrance. We were the last one, said someone from the Zhutong tribe. What about the last tribe? Other than Yinjiao, there are only 31 tribes here. Someone counted again. That's right, there were 31 tribes, one less. Could it be that they came and left? Some people wondered. In the midst of the discussion, someone looked at the Yinjiao chief, sitting at the head of the table. Gigu looked at the empty seat at the end and frowned. He turned and asked Zheng Luo, "Who's the last one?" After he asked, Gigu suddenly remembered. "That person, he's not here yet? Zheng Luo. Did he forget? I thought he didn't need to sleep?" He probably forgot because he was thinking too much. Zheng Luo planned to send someone to find Gan Xia. If he didn't see him on the list, he would have forgotten about that person. These few days, he had been thinking about the tribes that answered the summons, and neglected this dangerous person right under his nose. Also, he didn't expect Gan Xia to stand up for the entire tribe. As they were talking, a figure walked out from one of the doors in the Flaming River Castle. Because it was daytime, Gan Xia was still wearing a cloak and a hood that covered most of his face. "All right, the last tribe is here too," Gigu said as he looked at Gan Xia. "The last tribe? Where is it?" Someone looked around. "I don't see him. There's no one at the Beast Fang gate." "Hey, it can't be that person, right?" Someone pointed at Gan Xia. "Alone?" While everyone was confused, Gan Xia walked in and said, "Gan Xia of the Han tribe. I answered the summons and came here." Boom! Everyone was shocked by Gan Xia's words, regardless of whether they were happy or angry about the competition. Han tribe? I've never heard of them. Alone? He came alone. Aren't they all chiefs or shamans? Is he the chief of the Han tribe? Gan Xia looked at the source of the loudest roar. Someone was yelling, "Why are you here alone? Is there no one else in your tribe?" Gan Xia walked over and stopped 5 meters away from the person. He looked down calmly at the person sitting on the animal skin cushion and said, "I'm the only one in my tribe. Do you have a problem with that?" The chief of the Water Tiger tribe was sneering at Gan Xia, saying that there was no one else in the Han tribe. When he saw Gan Xia walk over and look down on him, he felt provoked. The smile on his face immediately disappeared. He stood up and took a step forward. Looking at Gan Xia, who was a head lower than him, he growled like a beast. "Are you talking to me?" Gan Xia's expression didn't change. He didn't answer the other party's question. Instead, he repeated his words with the same tone. He didn't raise or lower his voice. "Do you have a problem with that?" Gan Xia's attitude made the chief of the Water Tiger tribe furious. He was clearly looking down on him. The veins on the Water Tiger tribe's leader's forehead throbbed as he took a deep breath. His chest expanded as he took a deep breath. His eyes widened, and his pupils dilated several times. The muscles on his back and shoulders bulged, and his skin tightened, revealing his powerful muscles. He opened his arms to both sides, and his knuckles cracked. Green stripes covered his entire body. He took another step forward. The moment his feet touched the ground, there was a muffled thud. It didn't seem like he was just using brute force. His entire body moved like a fierce tiger. In the next moment, he appeared in front of Gan Xia. The distance between the two of them was shortened from 5 meters to only 1 step. His round eyes glowed fiercely, and his breath rushed to his throat. Roar! A tiger-like roar came out of his throat. The sound wave rushed towards Gan Xia, who was standing in front of him. The people around them were also affected. Their clothes flapped in the wind. However, Gan Xia's hood and cloak only moved slightly. The wind didn't even lift the hood, let alone the cloak. Seeing this, the chief of the Water Tiger tribe roared twice more. Each roar was louder than the last. It was so loud that everyone's eardrums felt like they were going to burst. The people around them covered their ears and retreated. However, after the 3 roars, even the slowest person realized that something was wrong. Gan Xia's cloak and hood seemed to be stuck tightly to his body. Everyone else in the hall looked over. Some were weighing something, some were deep in thought, and some were just there to watch the show. The surroundings were silent. Only the heavy breathing of the chief could be heard. He felt the totemic power in his body circulating crazily after the 3 roars. The chief stared at Gan Xia, who was still standing there. He wondered if he should roar a few more times. "Are you done roaring?" Gan Xia raised his head slightly and asked calmly. It was as if the roars were just a joke, and he wasn't affected at all. The Water Tiger chief didn't have time to think. In the next moment, he saw Gan Xia's eyes turn blood red. The part of his face that wasn't covered by the hood was covered by some dense veins. Ganxia's legs didn't move, but his body leaned forward. A series of cracking sounds came from his back. His naturally hanging arms shook violently. 5 long dark brown, knife-like claws pierced out from the tips of his fingers. His cloak fluttered, and the hood was lifted up. His white hair looked like the mane of an angry beast. He opened his mouth and 2 fangs elongated. He let out a long roar. If the roar of the Water Tiger tribe's chief was like the roar of a tiger in the forest, then Ganxia's roar was like the roar of heaven and earth. It was like a blizzard, a tsunami, and a landslide. It was so powerful that it was suffocating. The surrounding air was distorted by this long howl. Boom! The stone table not far away was pushed back by the roaring wind. Bang! Bang! The pottery on the table cracked. Crack! Crack! Cracks appeared on the ground where Ganxia was standing. Countless small pieces shattered. Facing Ganxia at such a close distance, the Water Tiger chief felt as if an ancient beast that had just woken up was staring at him coldly. He had the urge to turn around and run away. His entire body was blown back by the wind. It wasn't that he wanted to retreat. He tried his best to stay where he was. His feet created 2 deep pits in the ground, but he was still pushed back by Ganxia. The biting cold aura around him instantly dissipated under Ganxia's roar. The Water Tiger tribe's chief roared 3 times. The first roar lasted around 10 seconds, and the third one lasted around 20 seconds. To the Water Tiger tribesmen who loved to roar, 10 seconds was already a long time. Roars of this level that lasted 20 seconds were very rare in the Water Tiger tribe. At that time, the Water Tiger tribesmen were proud of themselves. The Water Tiger tribesmen had been practicing roaring since they hadn't awakened their totemic powers. Roaring was also a form of combat. Every Water Tiger tribesman had astonishing lung capacity. They had always wanted to show off their skills here. However, reality slapped them in the face. Someone else's roar was even stronger than theirs. By the time Ganxia's howl reached 20 seconds, the Water Tiger tribesmen were already in shock. By the time it reached 30 seconds, the Water Tiger tribesmen were already in a daze. However, Ganxia didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. He was still going on. 40 seconds, 50 seconds. Ganxia only stopped after a minute. He wasn't panting. His breathing wasn't even erratic. No. The Water Tiger tribesmen finally regained their senses from the shock. They looked at Ganxia from head to toe. This person didn't seem to be breathing. His chest wasn't even moving up and down. For a moment, the Water Tiger tribesmen were as silent as cicadas in winter. Ganxia's bloodshot eyes looked at the Water Tiger tribesman, who had already taken a few steps back. The Water Tiger tribesman behind him shuddered. "Do you have any objections?" Ganxia asked again in a calm voice. The Water Tiger tribesman's face twitched. His back was covered in cold sweat. It was as if the blood in his body had frozen. He paused for a moment before replying in a hoarse voice, "No." Ganxia looked past the Water Tiger tribesman and looked at the Water Tiger tribesman behind him. "Do you have any objections?" "No. No." The Water Tiger tribesmen shook their heads vigorously. What a joke. Their chief had already lost. They didn't have the guts to go against this person. Ganxia scanned the crowd again. "Do you have any objections?" "No. No. No objections." The tribesmen that Ganxia scanned quickly expressed their opinions. Even Si-Du from the Ji tribe felt his scalp go numb when he looked into Ganxia's bloodshot eyes. "Does anyone else have any objections?" Ganxia scanned the crowd with his bloodshot eyes. Everyone who saw him couldn't help but look away. They didn't dare to look him in the eye. Even if they were far away, they could still feel the murderous aura emanating from those bloodshot eyes. They also noticed that the ground where Ganxia was standing was slightly yellow. A layer of sand was blown up by the wind. Sand? There definitely wasn't any. The only explanation was that Ganxia caused all of this. Seeing that no one spoke, Ganxia pulled his hood over his head to block the sun. Then he walked towards the Rain tribe. The location of the Rain tribe had been decided long ago. Ganxia didn't ask Yinjiao to reserve it for him. He didn't look at the Rain tribe. Instead, he looked at the Bo tribe who was sitting next to them. "I want this spot." His tone was as calm as ever. It was simple and he didn't say anything unnecessary, but it made people feel pressured. The chief of the Bo tribe swallowed his saliva and turned to look at the people behind him. Seeing that everyone was nodding their heads, he got up and moved aside. The other tribesmen didn't laugh at the Bo tribe's action. They would have done the same if they were in Wuxia's shoes. Even though it was just a roar, it was enough to let them know how powerful this person was. Han tribe. At least they remembered that there was only one person in this tribe. And this person was terrifyingly powerful. They even had a feeling that even if they used all their strength, they might not be able to defeat him. Terrifying. Truly terrifying. He didn't seem human at all. Wuxia of the Han tribe. They remembered him. Yang Sui's face was pale. His hands were trembling uncontrollably. It was him. Wuxia of the Han tribe. The only living member of the Han tribe. He was just one person, but he gave Yang Sui a great sense of danger. At the same time, Yang Sui could tell that Wuxia's gaze towards them wasn't what he expected. Although it wasn't good, there wasn't any strong killing intent. Instead, there was a sense of contempt and even disregard. Wuxia looked down on the current Rain tribe. He felt that they were too weak and didn't deserve his attention. Yang Sui noticed Wuxia's attitude and heaved a sigh of relief. It didn't matter if it was contempt or disregard, as long as he didn't intend to kill the Rain tribe. Moreover, since Wuxia had chosen to join the Great Alliance that Yin Jiao had stopped, it meant that as long as the Great Alliance existed, as long as the Rain tribe was in the Great Alliance, as long as Wuxia didn't leave the Great Alliance, they wouldn't have to fight him. The 32 tribes had all arrived and were seated. The shadow of an eagle flashed across the sky. A person descended from the sky and landed on the field. Bang! There was a muffled sound from the ground. Sorry, I'm late. Xiao Xian walked quickly towards Yanjiao. Xiao Xian was called over because there was a problem in the forging room. Yigu and the others knew about this. Although the Great Alliance was important, they wouldn't ignore the situation in the forging room. How is it? Yigu asked in a low voice. It's not a big problem. It's been solved, Xiao Xian said. That's good. Yin Jiao was seated at the front. There were 3 seats facing the 32 tribes. They were for the current chief, the shaman, and Xiao Xian, the great elder. The 3 of them were here. Yigu looked at the 32 tribes and said, Then, let the meeting officially begin. Chapter 779. Outside the Flaming River Castle, the onlookers who didn't know what was going on were discussing about the roars. Some of them were so wild that even the fearsome beasts couldn't stop them from thinking. The Water Tiger tribesmen could recognize their chief's roars. After hearing the first 3 roars, they could guess the situation their chief was in. It must have been someone provoking them, or their chief was trying to show off his power. However, the last roar was too loud. As a tribe that loved roaring, they knew this kind of roar very well. Even though they didn't know what was going on inside, one thing was for sure. Their chief had lost the battle just now. However, after that, there wasn't much movement inside. They could only hear some vague noises. If someone was shouting loudly, they could still hear it, but they couldn't hear anything else. As for the onlookers who were further away, they couldn't hear anything unless they had extremely good hearing. The people outside were making all sorts of guesses. Meanwhile, the people inside the Flaming River Castle were starting their first round of discussion. Yin Jiao didn't think that all the tribes that answered the summons were really willing to join the Great Alliance. In order to let everyone know more about the Great Alliance, Yigu explained the rules again. Those who broke the rules would be eliminated by the Great Alliance. Everyone who joined the Great Alliance had to contribute something. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get help from other tribes in the Great Alliance. There was no such thing as a free meal in this world. There was no such thing as an ally who didn't do anything. Those tribes who can't do these things can leave now. Yigu looked at the 32 tribes in the square. When they received the summons from Yin Jiao, some of them didn't understand what was going on. They only rushed over to join the Great Alliance because their tribes were facing a threat. Now, after Yigu's explanation, some of them hesitated. Obviously, there were some things they didn't want to follow. They didn't even want to take the risk. If you don't leave now, it won't be so easy to leave in the future. You'll have to pay a higher price, Xiao Xian said. I have a question. The chief of the Zhutong tribe said. After joining the Great Alliance, Will we be able to learn how to merge fire seeds? Of course. However, at the same time, if there are any tribes who want to leave the alliance after learning the method, I advise you to leave as soon as possible. The chief of the Zudong tribe shook his head. I'm just trying to confirm the authenticity of this matter. I have no intention of withdrawing from the alliance. What Gigu had just said about the rules that the tribes in the Great Alliance had to follow were actually very beneficial to the people of the Zhutong tribe. Their Zhutong tribe was good at digging wells. In the future, if any tribe in the alliance needed to dig wells, they would have to pay a certain amount of remuneration. If they went back on their word or purposely paid a small amount of remuneration, then they would be criticized in the alliance meeting. Furthermore, the tribe that violated the rules would be punished accordingly. Gigu looked at the people present, and none of them backed out. These people had dared to come all the way here after careful consideration. Of course, they would not back out at this time. I have another document here that I would like to show everyone. Xiao Xian ordered his men to distribute 32 animal hide scrolls. This document lists the pros and cons. The document that Xiao Xian had given them was a statistical analysis. It pointed out the differences between merging fire seeds and not, as well as the differences between joining the Great Alliance and not joining the Great Alliance. The pros and cons were all listed, and there was even evidence and detailed analysis. At the end of the document, there was a conclusion. Xiao Xian had asked EC to do this analysis. If the analysis was accurate, then it would naturally be more comprehensive. Although EC rarely left the Flaming River trading point, he had gathered a lot of information. In addition to his statistical and analytical talents, this analysis was definitely something that no one else could do. It was convincing enough. EC did not know how to perform divination. He did not have the E family's divination talent, but he had strong analytical abilities. This ability was enough to make up for his inadequacies in divination. This was also why EC could always predict things that no one else could. It was all because of his analysis. Every chief placed great importance on the analysis on the animal hide scroll. They ignored the food on the table and began to read the scroll after wiping their hands. From time to time, they would communicate with the people around them. Most of the chiefs were literate. Those who were illiterate had people around them who were literate. It had to be said that the results of the analysis were very persuasive. Other than the analysis of resources and strength, there was also the analysis of population. Every single one of these was extremely tempting. This calmed down some of the people who were originally nervous. There were also some people whose ambitions were aroused by some of the prospects described in the book. Since no one wants to back out, then we will have a further discussion later. Gigu asked Zheng Luo and Ao to stay here. He, Guizhe, Xiao Xian, and the chiefs of the 32 tribes entered the meeting room in the Flaming River Castle for a secret discussion. The discussion in this open-air meeting room was not confidential, so it was fine even if someone heard it. However, when it came to merging the Fire Seed and other matters of the Great Alliance, they had to take precautions to keep it a secret. With the foreshadowing and hearing that they were going to enter the meeting room in the Flaming River Castle for a secret discussion, the chiefs no longer felt uneasy. They asked their subordinates to wait outside, while they followed the Yinjiao people into the meeting room. Inside the Flaming River Castle, a large meeting room had been set up. This was where the Yinjiao people used to meet. Now, it could accommodate 30 to 50 people. Xiao Xian took out a scroll with the main stream and tributaries of the Flaming River drawn on it. Unlike before, this scroll was bigger. Everyone in the meeting room could see it clearly. There were also 32 small dots on the map. Each dot represented the location of the tribes that answered the summons. Ganxia was an exception. He was directly in the Flaming River trading point. Xiao Xian explained his idea of dividing the regions according to the water system. If there were any problems in the future, they could solve it in their own regions. If they couldn't solve it, they could bring it to the Flaming River Castle. After Xiao Xian explained his idea of dividing the water system, the meeting room went into an uproar. Some people objected to Xiao Xian's idea of dividing the water system. Two tribes that belonged to one of the tributaries even started to scold him. Those violent people are on the same side as them? I'm afraid I'll be strangled to death if I go over. Do you think I'm happy? You bunch of weaklings. I don't even want to talk to you. One complained that the other was too cowardly and only knew how to avoid trouble. The other one also disliked the other for being extremely stupid and only cared about charging forward. Although they argued fiercely, in the end, the division of the water system still grouped them together. The two tribes had been living together for many years. Although there were always small conflicts, there were never any major conflicts. There was always a reason for their long-term coexistence. However, when it came to the naming of the tributaries, the tribes that belonged to the same system started to argue again. They all wanted to add their own names or totems. The only ones who were quiet were the people from the main water system. On the main branch side, Yin Jiao was the leader. The Taiha tribe, Drumming tribe, Rain tribe, Han tribe, Ganxie and the others, as well as the New Lu tribe, would all follow Yin Jiao's idea. After settling the division of the water system, Xiao Xian told them about merging their fire seeds. He also wrote down the things they needed to pay attention to before merging their fire seeds, and gave them to the tribes that hadn't merged their fire seeds yet. You can refer to what's written here. You can also ask the tribes that have merged their fire seeds, Xiao Xian said. Those who could understand it were studying it carefully, while those who couldn't carefully rolled up the animal skin scroll and put it away. When they left the trading point, they would bring it back to the shaman of the tribe. Others couldn't understand it, but the shaman could. Some of the people from the other tribes started to ask the Drumming tribe and Rain tribe about merging their fire seeds. Gigu knocked on the table with his knuckles. The people who were discussing stopped talking and looked at him. There are two things that I need everyone to prepare for, Gigu said. What are they? Someone asked. Gigu thought about what he had discussed with Xiao Xian and said, before winter, there will be a hunt. If any of the tribes that have merged their fire seeds and want to follow the Yin Jiao into the forest to hunt, you can come to the Flaming River trading point. Gigu's words made many people's eyes light up. Hunt? Really? Are we going into the forest with fearsome beasts? Lu Zhai's breathing quickened. Just thinking about it made his blood boil. He couldn't wait. We, the Water Tiger tribe, will definitely come. The Water Tiger tribe's chief cheered up again. His bad mood after losing to Ganxie was instantly lifted. In some ways, the Water Tiger tribesmen were a little thick-skinned. If they lost, they lost. They would admit defeat, but they wouldn't say things like that. Xiao Xian didn't think they would do anything behind his back. Of course, it would take time to prove what kind of people these tribes were. Some of the tribes said that if the merging of their fire seeds went smoothly, they would send people over as training. They also had to prepare food for winter. According to Yin Jiao's rules, the Yin Jiao would bring them into the forest to hunt. They would have to hand over a portion of what they hunted, and could only keep half of what they hunted. When the time came, they could choose to bring the hunted back to their tribe, or trade it for other things at the trading point. Knowing that the trading point would be open for winter, some tribesmen who relied on their skills for survival became excited. They wouldn't come out during winter, but before winter, they could trade at the trading point. They could make the most of what they had and maximize the value of what they had. Other than hunting, there's one more thing. After a pause, Gigu continued. Yin Jiao will be expanding the trading point. Those who want to participate in this expansion can look for Elder Zheng Luo after the meeting. Expansion? The Flaming River trading point is already so big. Why does it still need to be expanded? Someone was surprised. It's not enough. There will be more people joining the Great Alliance in the future. Yin Jiao plans to build a trading point at the Stone Forest too, Gigu said. The meeting lasted for 2 days. Most of the time, they were discussing the merging of their fire seeds. When the meeting ended, and the Beast Fang Gate opened again, all the tribes walked out one after another. This time, the atmosphere was much calmer than when they first entered. Although there were still people who fought over who came out first, it was much gentler. They didn't start fighting like when they first arrived. After learning about the merging of their fire seeds, they didn't stay in Yin Jiao for long. Some left the day after leaving the Flaming River Castle, while others left on the second or third day. The good news was that these people had already started to work together. According to the water system, it was safer for tribes who were in the same water system to travel together. The tribes that gathered at the trading point left very quickly. The lively trading point suddenly became quiet. Although it was usually like this, with the hustle and bustle of the Great Alliance meeting, the trading point now looked very quiet. "It'll be lively again very soon," Xiao Xian said as he stood on the roof of the Flaming River Tower and looked ahead. After a period of time, Xiao Xian could always feel the ripples of the fire seed's energy. Even though the ripples were very far away from the Flaming River trading point, and other people couldn't sense it, Xiao Xian could still feel it. He could even tell which tribe had successfully merged their fire seeds, based on the aura of the fire seeds. At first, there were only a few places where the ripples of the fire seed's energy could be felt. As the days passed, the ripples of the fire seed's energy became more frequent. Sometimes, Xiao Xian could feel 3 or 4 places a day. When all the tribes that responded to the summons had successfully merged their fire seeds, Xiao Xian looked at the weather that was starting to turn cold. He told everyone in the trading point to be careful. The trading point would be lively again in the coming days. As the leader of the Great Alliance, Yin Jiao wouldn't eat all the meat and leave the others with nothing to drink. That was why they brought people out to hunt before winter. They also wouldn't bring these people to every hunting route. Instead, they chose one route as a trial. These tribes either wanted to use this hunt as a form of training, or they wanted to hunt for more food to survive the winter. As for the Flaming Horn tribe, they wanted to use this hunt to understand the behavior and character of these tribes. Soon, teams arrived at the Flaming River trading point one by one. Compared to the last time, there were many unfamiliar faces in the teams this time. However, their overall strength was on the stronger side. They should be the elites of those tribes. It was obvious that if they went into the forest to hunt fearsome beasts, they would only be courting death. Ta's hunting team had already entered the forest to hunt. When they returned, it was time for the Great Alliance's team to set off. Because Yin Jiao was bringing these people out to hunt, Xiao Xian and the other Yin Jiao people's main mission was to protect these people and prevent them from dying in the forest. Their main focus wasn't on hunting. That was why, in order to maintain the tribe's livelihood and the operation of the trading point, Ta would bring his team out to hunt first and prepare enough food for daily consumption. When most of the tribes had arrived, Ta's team also returned. Tell those tribes to prepare to cross the river and hunt. Chapter 780. 32 tribes, plus the 3 tribes that didn't make it to the gathering, because it was too far away for them to travel for the first time, made up a total of 35 tribes. They followed the Yinjiao hunting team into the forest. The 3 teams that were late arrived at the trading point after the gathering ended. They didn't go back immediately. Instead, they waited for the hunt to end before going back, because their tribes were too far away. Speaking of this, 2 tribes even expressed that if they could successfully merge their fire seed, they might move upstream. In the past, they lived in deserted places far away from other tribes for safety reasons. Now they planned to move to places with more tribes for safety reasons as well. The situation was different, so was the way to do things. Of course, not every tribe that came joined the hunt. Tribes that weren't good at fighting and didn't have much of an advantage only sent a few people. Some even sent only 1 or 2 people. Compared to the Thunder Mountain tribe and the Water Tiger tribe, they were nothing. But after all, the tribes had different styles. Some people didn't hunt for a living, so they didn't have any experience in this area. If they insisted on going, not only would they be a burden, they might even lose their lives before entering the forest. Even the weakest tribe would send out 1 or 2 people to go hunting with the team. Some were chiefs, and some were excellent warriors of the tribe. For example, the Drumming tribe absolutely didn't want to fight fearsome beasts. In the past, they wouldn't have the guts to go into the forest with fearsome beasts either. But now, with so many tribes joining the alliance and so many people going hunting, if they didn't send anyone to join the hunt, they would definitely be laughed at by other tribes. That was why Abuli, who was the chief and considered himself the strongest in the tribe, brought 2 warriors from the drumming tribe to join the hunt. The 3 of them were the 3 people with the biggest legs in the drumming tribe. They were also the fastest. If they encountered any danger, they could run away even if they couldn't win. In the minds of most tribesmen, strength was everything. That was why the tribes that were good at fighting were more arrogant and confident. Those who didn't like to solve problems by force and weren't good at fighting chose to use their skills in exchange for survival resources. Those who didn't join the hunt would wait in the trading area. While waiting for the hunting team, they would adapt to everything in the trading area. Some of them would also participate in Yinjiao's expansion of the trading area. Before they set off, Xiao Xian had called the leaders of each tribe or hunting team together and told them what they should pay attention to in the forest. The inexperienced tribesmen should observe the experienced Taihe tribesmen or Yinjiao warriors. They shouldn't use the same techniques they used to deal with wild beasts. The hunting route Yinjiao chose wasn't one of the 6 routes they used before, but the newly opened 7th route. The number of fierce beasts on this route was less than the other 6, because there were many places that weren't suitable for plants to grow. Naturally, the number of fierce beasts on this route was lower than the other 6 routes. This route wasn't suitable for Yinjiao alone, but it was very suitable for these tribesmen. If there were too many fierce beasts, Yinjiao wouldn't be able to save them even if they had more people. There were about 300 people from the other tribes in the hunting team. Tribes like the Thunder Mountain tribe and the Drumming tribe each had about 50 people, but most of the other tribes had less people. Tribes like the Drumming tribe didn't have a large population and weren't good at fighting or hunting. The number of people in their teams could be counted on one hand. Luckily, the Thunder Mountain tribe, the Drumming tribe and the Water Tiger tribe were divided into 3 different water systems when they were hunting. The 3 tribes didn't have any conflicts at the moment, but they still wanted to compete with each other. After crossing the Flaming River Bridge, they walked deeper into the forest. The trees around them grew taller and taller, and the grass grew thicker and thicker. In some places, the grass was so thick that it could drown a person. Even the roots of the trees were thicker than the strongest person in the group, let alone this forest full of ancient trees. The 500 people in the group were like ants in the forest. The fog surrounding the mountains seemed to exude a quiet, murderous aura. It was as if something dangerous was hiding in the fog, silently looking down on the group. Tiny. This was the first impression they had when they entered the forest for the first time. They seemed to understand why Yinjiao brought them here. If they didn't come, they wouldn't know how tiny they were. The Yinjiao tribesmen chose to hunt as their first group activity, because they wanted to change some of the tribesmen's personalities, especially those who were usually arrogant. The masters of this forest were not the wild beasts they usually hunted, but the fierce beasts that were even more dangerous than wild beasts. Their ancestors might have encountered fierce beasts 1,000 years ago, but their descendants had been isolated by the river for almost 1,000 years, so they didn't have the experience to deal with fierce beasts. If one were to say that these tribes were swords, then these swords were rusty or blunt swords that had not been sharpened yet. After experiencing the hunting in the forest, these swords would become much sharper. In order to prevent more people from being taken away by the slave masters, these tribesmen would also sharpen their knives. The roar of a beast came from afar. It sounded excited. The Yinjiao tribesmen who often hunted could tell that it was the roar of a fierce beast after successfully chasing away an intruder. There must have been a fierce battle before this. Roar, roar, roar. A roar came from the group. The tribesmen, who were looking around nervously, were so scared by the sudden roar that they started digging into the ground. Abuli had already taken a few steps forward when he realized that the roar came from the team. Everyone looked over and saw the chief of the Water Tiger tribe, Chuli, roaring at the top of his lungs. The veins on his neck were bulging. The other Water Tiger tribesmen behind him were about to speak too. "Shut up," Xiao Xian said in a low voice. Hearing this, Chuli stopped roaring. He realized that the Yinjiao tribesmen in front of him were looking at him speechlessly. The other tribesmen didn't look too happy either. Some even looked like they were about to rush over. "Sorry, I couldn't help it." Chuli also realized that his actions were inappropriate. But when he heard the roar from afar, He suddenly felt like he had an epiphany. The blood in his body seemed to be bubbling. He was so excited that he couldn't describe it with words, so he could only roar out loud. The water tiger tribesmen liked to vent their emotions by roaring when they were emotional. No matter if it was anger, sadness, or excitement, they would all do it. This was a habit that had been passed down for thousands of years. The ancestors of the water tiger tribe had passed down this habit even longer ago. This was also why Chuli couldn't help himself just now. But in this situation, Chuli's actions were courting death. In the forest, some fierce beasts would roar like this to declare their territory and warn outsiders. Besides that, roaring was also a form of provocation. What an idiot! Many people cursed in their hearts. If it weren't for the fact that it wasn't convenient to speak loudly here, they would definitely have cursed him on the spot. They might even have rushed over to beat him up. In this forest sometimes, you'll die faster if you roar. Xiaoxian said. Roaring in the forest also required skills and techniques. When to roar, and when not to roar, depended on the specific situation. And that moment just now was clearly not the time to roar. As they walked forward, they didn't need any more instructions from the Yinjiao tribesmen. They were all silent, as if their bodies were on the highest alert. Even the water tiger tribesmen kept their mouths shut. Everyone who followed them, even if they weren't the best warriors in their tribes, was definitely outstanding. Their instincts were also quite sharp. There were threats all around. Although the towering trees and tall grass blocked their vision to a large extent, many people could still intuitively sense some things that could not be seen with their eyes. Around them was a patch of grass taller than a person. There were things hidden in the grass, and there were many eyes filled with killing intent staring at them from all directions. Seeing how nervous everyone was, Xiaoxian said, "Don't worry, those are shadow sparrows. They're very cunning. The stronger and calmer you appear, the less likely they'll attack you. But if you cower, they'll list you as targets to test." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of flapping wings came from 100 meters ahead. Looking up, they saw gray-green birds about half the height of a person taking flight. Caesar, who was beside Xiaoxian, bared his fangs and let out a low growl. Xiaoxian stopped in his tracks and raised his hand to signal. 8 Yinjiao warriors raised their weapons and snuck forward. What's going on?" Abuli asked. Before Xiaoxian could explain, a deafening bestial roar sounded in front of them. Xiaidu leaped onto the nearest tree and looked ahead. Without the cover of the bushes, he could see what was happening even though the trees were blocking his vision. The others in the group also climbed up the tree and looked in that direction. It was a huge vicious beast. Standing on the ground, its back alone was 4 times taller than them. Its fur was dark brown and thick. A tree with a trunk as thick as 10 people hugging it was broken. 2 powerful hind legs pushed off the ground, pushing its huge body into the air, and pouncing in a certain direction. Other than that vicious beast, Xiaidu also saw a few figures moving about. Those were the 8 Yinjiao warriors who had just passed by. Even though they were a little far away, everyone in the group could clearly feel the ground trembling. That was the sound of the vicious beast's powerful hind legs stomping on the ground. It went without saying that the Yinjiao warriors, who were close to the vicious beast, could feel the tremors. Xiaidu, Chuli, Lu Zhai and the other leaders of the Thunder Mountain tribe all stared unblinkingly in that direction. That vicious beast's attacks weren't flashy. They were simple, direct, and effective. It made full use of its natural advantages to create even more lethal attacks. It waved its claws repeatedly, making whooshing sounds in the air. It was as if sharp blades were dancing in the air. Not only did it have great strength, but it also had great lethality. Everyone who saw this scene had no doubt that those claws could slice a person into several pieces. In the face of such a ferocious attack, even the flaming horns, who were considered strong in the tribe, seemed weak at this moment. Boom! Another series of crashing sounds rang out as more trees were knocked down. The sound of tree trunks breaking was like the sound of thunder. Countless wood shavings flew into the air, along with bits of grass. For a moment, it was hard to see what was going on. The only thing that was clear was the sound of the ground shaking and the thunderous sound of tree trunks snapping. The tribes that didn't hunt for a living all sucked in cold breaths when they saw this scene. To them, against such a vicious beast, there was no way they could survive. It wasn't because they were weak, but because they had no experience. Their faces were pale with fright. Even the Yinjiao warriors, who had superior strength and physique, couldn't gain the upper hand against a vicious beast of this level. Most of them relied on teamwork and hunting techniques to kill the vicious beast bit by bit. If even the Yinjiao warriors were like this, then the other tribes who weren't as strong as the Yinjiao warriors were naturally even more cautious. And Yinjiao's actions were a warning to the other tribes. Don't be arrogant, don't be pretentious. If you really wanted to fight those vicious beasts one-on-one, and think you could fight them head-on, the result was that you'd be killed instead of being pretentious. The Yinjiao warriors who didn't participate in the battle shared some knowledge with the other tribes, who came to the forest for the first time. They also warned them not to fight those vicious beasts one-on-one. If they got separated from the group and encountered such vicious beasts, they definitely couldn't fight them head-on. If they couldn't escape, they had to use their wits to win. They had to try their best to grind out a chance of survival. Even the Yinjiao warriors can't fight it one-on-one? Xiaidu, the chief of the Ji tribe, suddenly asked. Who said that? Chief, Elder Zheng Luo, Elder Ao, Team Leader Ta, and Team Leader Duokong all had the experience of fighting such vicious beasts one-on-one. But not everyone has the strength to fight such a vicious beast. Some people in the group didn't agree with the Yinjiao warriors' words. If the Yinjiao warriors could fight such a vicious beast one-on-one, why couldn't their chief do the same? Chief, Elder, Team Leader. Hey, can't your Grand Elder do it? Xiaidu asked. The Yinjiao warrior who explained to them felt that Xiaidu had asked a pointless question. Our Grand Elder even fought a vicious beast one-on-one. Do you think he can do it? Xiaidu's expression became more serious, but at the same time, he was secretly happy. Sure enough, not all Yinjiao warriors were as strong as Xiaoxian. It seemed that the difference between the Yinjiao and the Ji tribe wasn't that big. Maybe they could catch up. Xiaoxian didn't know what the others were thinking. He was only paying attention to the battle. Even if he couldn't see, he could sense the life auras of the 8 Yinjiao warriors. Roar! There was a mournful roar of a vicious beast. Xiaidu, who was on the tree, noticed that the ferocious beast, which was 4 to 5 times taller than them, had begun to panic in fear and wanted to escape. It had been injured by the Yinjiao warriors, but the Yinjiao warriors didn't give it a chance to escape. Not long after the commotion died down, the Yinjiao warriors who had gone past dragged a vicious beast back. The group immediately went over to take a closer look at the vicious beast. Don't look. You'll see more if you keep going, Mai said to the people who wanted to squeeze in to see the vicious beast. Let's find a place to eat first, Xiaoxian said. They were almost at the place they had chosen. If they kept going forward, the grass wouldn't be as deep, and the forest wouldn't be as dense. Before they reached the hunting spot, the Yinjiao warriors had demonstrated hunting methods to the people who were entering the forest for the first time. Of course, different tribes had different styles of doing things, so the Yinjiao warriors had only demonstrated a few times. As for how to do it, the people of each tribe had to figure out a method that suited them. The people of each tribe could learn a lot from the Yinjiao warriors when it came to the larger vicious beasts, but they couldn't learn the Yinjiao's methods when it came to the smaller vicious beasts. Even the smaller vicious beasts were much larger than humans. The Yinjiao warriors could lift them up like salted fish. They slammed the vicious beasts to the ground, flipped them over a few times, and then slammed them down again in a different position. The thick grass on the ground was destroyed into a mess. Bits of grass flew everywhere, and rocks scattered in all directions. If it had been anyone else, it wouldn't have worked. They simply couldn't lift the vicious beasts up so easily. In this forest, the grass grows very quickly. Look over there now. It's almost like a layer of grass has been peeled off. But 10 days later, when you return, you'll see that it's covered in a layer of green again, Xiaoxian said to the others as he pointed to the battlefield where the battle had already ended. When they finally reached the hunting area, the hunting team split into 3 groups. The tribesmen of each water tribe formed a branch team, and the Yinjiao warriors also followed the 3 teams. However, What made Xiao Xian alert was that he found traces of other human activity in this hunting area. Tell everyone to be careful. It doesn't matter if those people's goal is us or not. It's always good to be on guard. Chapter 781. In the forest, the roars of beasts and the shouts of humans could be heard from the sparse forest. The smell of blood spread in the air with the wind. Some animals that smelled the blood rushed over. If not for the fierce battle, they would have followed the smell of blood and rushed over to snatch the food. The scavenger birds in the air had been hovering nearby for a long time. They let out hoarse cries from time to time, as if urging the people on the ground to speed up. Boom! Following a shrill cry, the ground trembled, and the sound of trees breaking could no longer be heard. A few impatient scavenger birds rushed down, but they were killed by the blood-stained stone hammers. Only a few broken feathers were left floating in the air. The other scavenger birds saw this and could only cry out unwillingly. They did not dare to approach for a while. A group of people walked out of the forest. Their bodies were stained with blood. Some of it came from their wounds, while some came from the beasts. This was one of the three groups. Under the guidance of the Yinjiao people, these people who entered the forest for the first time gradually got rid of their initial discomfort. When they saw the beasts, they were no longer shocked and panicked. The hesitation and fear on their faces had disappeared, replaced by blood-stained faces full of murderous intent. Abuli wiped away the blood around his eyes and stood there, leaning against a tree as he panted heavily. Hunting beasts was physical work, and it also required mental effort. There was no room for slacking, so tiredness was inevitable. Every time he hunted a ferocious beast, he would feel as if he had finished a year's worth of physical work. However, although he was tired and had many injuries on his body, and there were even a few times where he almost lost his life, after enduring and adapting to it, it was a different feeling. He lowered his head and looked at his outstretched arm. His sleeves had become tattered during the hunt, and most of his arm was exposed. His tan-brown arm was covered with bloody scars of varying depths. Some of them were fresh wounds that were still bleeding, while others had already scabbed over. The body of a totem warrior had a very strong healing ability. Wounds caused by ordinary beasts could be healed very quickly, and even scars would not be left. Even those who were weak could rely on their body's self-healing ability to make their scars gradually disappear. However, wounds caused by ferocious beasts were not so easy to heal. Some wounds caused by ferocious beasts could remain for decades, or even until death. Abuli did not know how long the scars on his arm would last, but he did not wish for them to disappear. It would be best if they could last until he died. After all, these were his medals. Look, this is a wound caused by hunting dire beasts. In the drumming tribe, other than the few people he brought out, who else could have such a scar? When he thought of this, Abuli felt his back straighten up. His usual cowardice had also lessened. In the past, Abuli always felt inferior in front of those tribes that were stronger than them. It wasn't because of the difference in height, but because of the difference in aura and mentality. But now, Abuli turned his arm over and looked at it. He clenched his fists and looked at the muscles on his arm. I feel like I'm filled with strength. The chief of the Thunder Mountain tribe, Lu Zhai, glanced at Abuli, who was standing there with his chicken claw hairstyle. He spat a mouthful of blood on the ground and stretched his shoulders. His forearms were much thicker than Abuli's thighs. Every time they hunted, he would always be at the front. He did not know what was so good about the chief of the drumming tribe, who looked as thin and weak as a bean sprout, who would hide at the back of the team and occasionally make a few symbolic attacks. Filled with strength? That was just a psychological effect. Lu Zhai carried the heavy stone hammer that was stained with beast blood and scavenger bird feathers on his shoulder. With his other hand, he held onto a dire beast's claw. Together with the others, they dragged the dire beast they had just hunted to their resting area. However, Lu Zhai could understand Abuli's feelings. However, unlike Abuli and the others, Lu Zhai was already very excited when he came to the forest where the dire beasts lived. Although both his arms were injured and his bones were fractured, he could still hear a creaking sound when he moved his arm that was holding the hammer. The pain spread from his arm to his entire body. However, under the stimulation of this pain, Lu Zhai felt extremely good. His confidence, ambition expanded with every successful hunt. The aura around him also became more ferocious. There was still a cruel smile in his eyes. That was the gaze he used to look at his prey when he was hunting. The few people who were pulling the dire beast's prey panted like bellows. Abuli was pulled back from his self-improvement state. "Do you need help?" Abuli walked over. "No need." Lu Zhai waved his hand impatiently, indicating that Abuli should stay at the side and wait. When the hunters returned to their resting area, Xiao Xian had just returned to the cave with the herbs he found. He distributed the herbs and some healing pills that Gui Zhe had concocted to the injured. "How's your harvest today?" Xiao Xian asked the others who had entered the cave, after inquiring about the casualties. "Not bad." Lu Zhai sat on a rock to rest. Xiao Xian looked at a Thunder Mountain warrior behind Lu Zhai. That person had many injuries on his body. Moreover, he had been coming back with injuries for the past few days. It wasn't that he was weak. It was just that he was too hardworking. "You're really hardworking," Xiao Xian said. Lu Zhai followed Xiao Xian's gaze and looked back. He immediately understood. "You mean Changdi?" "There's no other way." As he spoke, Lu Zhai sighed. "You should all know that our Thunder Mountain tribe lost a few people. 3 of them were children, who hadn't awakened their totemic powers. One of the children who went missing was Changdi's son. At that time, Changdi brought his son to practice hunting. In the end, he accidentally discovered that the child was missing. He heard some noises, and was on high alert, but he was still one step too late. We tried to search for him, but unfortunately, we didn't find anything." Xiao Xian had also heard about the Thunder Mountain tribe's missing people. Yinjiao had also sent out some people to help search for them, but they didn't find any useful clues. Those slave masters were very experienced. After kidnapping people, they disappeared very quickly. It was extremely difficult to find them. Xiao Xian even sent a letter to the Longboat tribe about this. He told them to be careful when they went out to sea. If they saw any boats with tribesmen on board, they should try their best to stop them. Actually, after knowing that it might be the people from the other side of the sea, Changdi told me that he would make a trip to the other side of the sea. If we want to find the missing people, we have to go there. If we want to do this, we have to improve our strength first. That's why Changdi worked so hard. There weren't many people in the Thunder Mountain tribe to begin with. If they went to the other side of the sea, they would have to sacrifice too much. Even if Lu Zhai had the idea, he couldn't do it. Compared to the missing people, from his point of view, the other people in the tribe were more important. That was why Lu Zhai could only sigh when he mentioned Changdi. The other tribes were in the same situation. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come all the way to Yinjiao for help. "Sigh. I'm also worried that our tribesmen were kidnapped. Our tribe has even fewer people than your Thunder Mountain tribe," said Abuli as he came over. "Don't worry. If I stand with you, those people will definitely target me and not you. Their targets other than children are strong warriors," said Lu Zhai. "I'm strong too," Abuli argued. Lu Zhai didn't say anything. He only extended an arm, and Abuli stopped talking. After a moment of silence, Abuli thought, if those people are looking for strong warriors, why didn't they look for the Yinjiao tribesmen? He had never heard of any Yinjiao tribesmen losing people. Because they don't dare. Lu Zhai said in a low voice. As he answered Abuli, he also said to himself, those people don't dare to provoke the stronger tribes for now. They can only target small tribes like ours. This was also why he decided to join the Yinjiao tribe when he heard about the gathering order. Since he wasn't strong enough alone, wouldn't it be strong if he gathered them? Wouldn't those people not dare to kidnap people again? Abuli opened his mouth, but couldn't find the words to refute. Wasn't that right? The Yinjiao tribe was a large tribe. Just look at the expedition teams that entered the trading point. Many people didn't dare to attack the Yinjiao tribesmen. Moreover, the Yinjiao tribesmen were indeed stronger than many other tribes. They couldn't help but admire them. Abuli thought about how they had only hunted for a few days, and already felt that life was hard. But what about the Yinjiao tribesmen? Hunting fearsome beasts was as natural as eating. They were already used to it. Even if they hunted for a living, Not everyone could use Yinjiao's hunting method. Because different tribes had different fire seeds, they couldn't replicate Yinjiao's success. They didn't have the time, but they could use another method to solve their current problem. For example, they could join the League of Mercenaries. When they talked about the abduction of tribesmen, the joy of hunting in the cave disappeared. Chang Di, who wasn't far behind Lu Zhai, was even more silent. He only used more force when he sharpened the stone knife in his hand. At night, other than the people on night watch, everyone else was resting in the cave. At night, the roars of beasts could be heard in the forest. However, compared to the areas with dense ancient trees, this place was already considered quiet. In the first few days, they couldn't sleep at night. Even if they were sleepy, they would keep their eyes open and alert. The roars outside made them uneasy, but gradually, they got used to the atmosphere in the forest. Plus, they used up a lot of energy from hunting during the day, so they slept much better at night. Some indistinct goo-goo sounds came from not far away. Xiao Xian opened his eyes and listened carefully to the sounds outside the cave. It wasn't the sound of birds. It was the sound of humans. Perhaps those sounds could fool the other tribesmen who came to the forest, but they couldn't fool the Yinjiao tribesmen, who often came to the forest and imitated the sounds of birds to transmit information. Suddenly, someone shouted from outside the cave, "Chang Di is missing." Lu Zhai, who had already woken up, thought of something. His expression changed, and he got up to run outside. The other Thunder Mountain tribesmen, who heard the commotion, also got up and rushed out of the cave. "Go back to the cave," Lu Zhai shouted at the other Thunder Mountain tribesmen, who wanted to follow him out. They had already experienced how dangerous the forest was at night. He didn't want the other Thunder Mountain tribesmen to follow him out. Lu Zhai picked up his large stone hammer and rushed out of the cave. Unfortunately, as soon as he got out, his feet left the ground. Someone grabbed his animal skin jacket and threw him back. "Go back to the cave," Lu Zhai, who was easily thrown back into the cave. The other Thunder Mountain tribesmen. After Xiao Xian threw Lu Zhai back into the cave, he didn't look back at their expressions. He leaped onto Caesar's back and said, "Go find them." Chang Di, who was on night watch, wouldn't disappear for no reason. Those cooing sounds were the same ones Chang Di heard before his son went missing. If those people were the slave masters who kidnapped the tribesmen, then why were they here? Did they follow the team? Or was there another reason? Xiao Xian wanted to know too. Chapter 782. Xiao Xian rode on Caesar and sped through the forest. Caesar followed Chang Di's scent to find him. It was nighttime, and most of the people in the group had limited vision at night. Even if they could see nearby objects, they couldn't compare to those who were stronger at night. Their movements in the forest would be greatly restricted. If they were careless, they would lose their lives. That was why Xiao Xian threw Lu Zhai back into the cave. The Thunder Mountain tribesmen didn't move at night. Caesar was very fast. Xiao Xian could already hear the sounds of fighting and people shouting in front of them. It was Chang Di's voice. At this moment, Chang Di had already pinned someone to the ground and was beating him up. As he beat him, he asked, "Where is my son? Where did you take the people you abducted to? Speak." "I don't know." "Ah." Chang Di punched the man again. "Speak. Where did you take him? If you don't speak, I'll beat you to death." "I really don't know. You got the wrong person." The man frantically tried to explain. "I didn't. I'm beating you up." At this moment, Chang Di's body was slightly arched. His shoulders were shaking from the force of his punches. The muscles on his back were bulging, and he raised his arms. His fists were like heavy hammers. As he swung his arms, the sound of the wind could be heard. There was even a faint flash of electricity as he swung his fists. Another punch landed on the man's chest. The sound of his ribs breaking could be heard clearly. However, even though his attacks looked fierce, in reality, Chang Di held back his strength with every punch. After all, he didn't want to kill him yet. He hadn't gotten the answers he wanted from him yet. "I said, I don't know. You got the wrong person." The man who was being beaten up by Chang Di spoke. The panic in his eyes suddenly turned into a cold sneer with a hint of ruthlessness. Unbeknownst to Changdi, a figure had appeared behind him. The other party's movements were very subtle. His entire person was like a shadow in the night. Using the cover of the night, he silently appeared behind Changdi without Changdi noticing. The sharp blade that he drew did not reflect any light, but it caused the hair on the back of Changdi's neck to stand on end. He could feel the cold murderous intent behind him, but he had no time to react. Just as the shadow-like sharp blade slashed down, a cold light flashed like lightning and collided with the sharp blade. Clang! An ear-piercing clanging sound rang out, and their ears were pierced to the point that they lost their hearing for a moment. Translator, Atlas Studios editor. Atlas Studios. The person behind Changdi felt as though his fingers were about to fall apart. His entire arm was numb and painful. However, he didn't have time to rest. His other hand gripped the hilt of his saber and blocked it in front of him. It was too late to dodge now. He could only block the attack first, and then find an opportunity to dodge. Bang! A rock the size of a human head hit the blade. The person holding the saber with both hands felt his arms tremble. His slightly recovered right arm was once again filled with pain. His left arm was also trembling slightly. In the next moment, a figure had already charged in front of him. That person felt as though he had been hit by a small mountain. His entire body was sent flying, and he crashed heavily into a thick, ancient tree. Crack! The trunk of the ancient tree was directly broken. The person who had crashed into the tree also fell to the ground. It seemed like he had temporarily lost the ability to move. The person who had been pinned to the ground by Changdi took advantage of Changdi's distraction to break free from Changdi's suppression. His entire body slid out like a loach. Changdi stood up and wanted to chase after him. "Stay there," Xiaoxian shouted. Changdi hesitated for a moment, but still gritted his teeth and stayed where he was. He only used his ears to listen carefully. He couldn't see what was happening further away, and could only make guesses based on the sounds. At the same time, he was also alert to see if there were other people around him. He had been too anxious to ask about his son's whereabouts, and neglected the dangers around him. His neck had almost been slit by someone. Now that he had regained his senses, he knew that he shouldn't have been so careless. He could only search for his son if he was alive. If he was alive, he would have no hope. The person who had escaped from Changdi's hands didn't run away immediately. He knew that his speed couldn't compare to Xiaoxian's, so he took a detour and calculated the time. He jumped under the fallen tree and didn't care about his comrade who had fallen not far away. He couldn't even take care of himself. Where would he find the time to save his comrade? He might as well retreat first and find another chance to save him later. That person's estimation was very accurate. If it had been someone else chasing after him, they would have been hit by the fallen tree. Even if they weren't hit, they would have been slowed down by the falling tree. That person quickly turned his head back to take a look as he ran. He used one of his arms to grab the thick trunk of a fallen ancient tree and pushed it to the side. Using the force of pushing the tree, he quickly landed on the ground and bounced up again. The tyrannical force of his feet stomping on the ground created a pit in the ground. His body was like lightning, and with an even faster speed and the force of the wind, he rushed over. Bam! That person spat out blood as his body flew backward. He crashed into another ancient tree, at a speed faster than his comrade. He had already been injured by Changdi. Now that Xiaoxian had crashed into him, he was almost dead. Crack, crack, crack. The broken tree made a brittle sound as it fell to the ground. Xiaoxian stretched his shoulders. He didn't walk towards the person who had fallen to the ground. Instead, he walked towards the first person he crashed into. His sneak attack on Changdi didn't succeed. Instead, he was sent flying by Xiaoxian. He endured the pain all over his body and moved away from where he had fallen to avoid being crushed by a tree. The person beside the tree saw Xiaoxian walking towards him and instantly felt a chill run down his spine. He wanted to run too, but his bones were aching all over. He couldn't run even if he wanted to. He might as well talk to these tribesmen and buy some time to catch his breath before deciding what to do next. With that thought, the person beside the tree retracted his foot. He looked at Xiaoxian who was walking towards him and said, Let's talk. I know what you want to ask. I know a little. Before he could finish, Xiaoxian strode over and reached out his hand. He grabbed the person's shirt and lifted him up. I don't want to hear it, Xiaoxian said as he flung the person away. Just as the person was flung into the air, a figure flashed past. The person who had been beaten up by Changdi was initially relieved that Xiaoxian didn't come towards him. He had been nervously observing the situation over there. After all, they weren't too far apart, and he still had night vision. When he heard his companion's words, he also thought that these tribesmen would definitely not kill them for the time being, because they wanted to get some important information, just like the tribesmen who beat him up before. Although he looked intimidating, he didn't dare to kill them at all. Otherwise, where would these tribesmen get information from? However, what he saw in front of him shattered all his hopes of being lucky. He saw his companion being thrown away by the tribesmen. Then, a large wolf bit his companion and dragged him behind some bushes in the distance. It didn't look like it was playing around. The wolf's glowing eyes were filled with murderous intent. It was probably thinking about how to bite this person to death. Ah! Shrill screams came from behind the thick bushes. There were even the low growls of ferocious beasts. The smell of blood wafted from there, causing his skin to tighten. Just from the sounds alone, a brutal scene appeared in his mind. He didn't want to be bitten to death, that was for sure. However, he already saw Xiaoxian walking towards him. He knew that this tribesman was different from the one he had met before. This person walking over had no intention of listening to their explanations. His severe injuries severely limited his movements. He quickly thought of a solution in his mind. The sound of approaching footsteps was like a deadly knife. With every sound, he felt like his body was being cut by a knife. Xiaoxian maintained a steady pace, neither too fast nor too slow. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. Xiaoxian walked in front of that person and reached out to grab him. When he saw Xiaoxian reach out, that person immediately shouted, "Wait! I can tell you some important news. Very, very important news. It's related to the survival of your tribe." It didn't matter if it was true or not. In a serious situation, there was definitely a chance. Because he was too anxious, that person's voice was piercing and shrill. Some of his words were completely out of tune. That person stared at Xiaoxian's hand that was already in front of him, as if he was staring at a poisoned knife. His eyes were full of fear and nervousness. When he saw that hand finally stop, his heart calmed down a little. However, that hand then reached out again, and he suddenly screamed in fear. "Listen to me. I really can tell you some very important news. There's a treasure in this forest." "Really? Treasure?" His voice was hysterical and hoarse. This was a sign of extreme panic. "Oh!" A cold response interrupted that person's screams. As if he finally saw the light of hope, that person hurriedly said, "It's true. There's a treasure." He emphasized the word treasure again. "Treasure? Yes. Yes. Treasure." That person nodded vigorously. "I don't believe you," said Xiaoxian as he was about to throw that person out. "Don't. I'm telling you the truth. The Yi family is here. They're here to look for the treasure. We followed them into the forest." Because he was too anxious and nervous, afraid that Xiaoxian would throw him out to feed the wolves, that person blurted out a mixture of languages from the other side of the sea and this side of the forest. Changdi, who was standing there with his ears perked up, couldn't understand what that person was saying no matter how hard he tried. "The Yi family?" Xiaoxian brought back the person he was about to throw out. "What are the Yi family looking for here?" "I don't know. It's a worm. It's a worm." That person wanted to say that he didn't know, but when Xiaoxian moved his arm again, as if he was going to throw him out, he hurriedly told him what he knew. "What are they looking for? What kind of worm are they looking for?" asked Xiaoxian. "I don't know. We only eavesdropped. If you don't know anything, then let's just feed you to the wolves." Xiaoxian threw that person out. That person screamed in pain. Before he regained consciousness, the only thing he felt was a large, bloody mouth of a wolf coming at him. Thus, when Changdi saw the person who had kidnapped his son and beaten him up, that person was already unconscious and was being held in Caesar's mouth. If Caesar used a little bit of force, that person would be torn into 3 pieces. Xiao Xian was holding another person in his hand. That person was also unconscious, and not torn into pieces like Chang Di had imagined. Chapter 783. After Xiao Xian left, the other people in the cave didn't sleep. They were all paying attention to the movements outside. I brought some people to patrol the area and set up many traps. He didn't set any traps before, because he was worried that other tribesmen would fall into them. However, after what happened tonight, I changed his mind. Even if other tribesmen fell into the traps, it would be because they ran off. Damn it! What did it mean to run off alone in a forest where fearsome beasts lived at night for the first time? However, when he thought about the situation from the Thunder Mountain tribe, Mai understood that they would be worried if their own children went missing. However, he was still unhappy and didn't treat the Thunder Mountain tribesmen nicely. Seeing that Xiao Xian had returned safely, Mai hurried over and saw the people in Caesar's mouth and Xiao Xian's hands. "Who are they?" asked Mai. "They came from the other side of the sea. They should be slave masters." Xiao Xian couldn't ask too many questions when they were in the forest. There were too many threats in the forest. Unless it was a place to rest, they couldn't stay for too long. He could only force the most important information out of them, and then bring them back for further questioning. "It's them. Chief, they're the ones who kidnapped them." Chang Di panted as he ran over. "What? It's them? They're the ones who kidnapped our tribesmen." The other tribesmen who had lost tribesmen crowded over. They didn't blame Chang Di for running off. Instead, they focused on the 2 people Xiao Xian brought back. Their eyes were filled with hatred as they stared at the 2 people on the ground. "I'll ask them first." Mai dragged them away. The 2 of them stood far apart, one inside the cave, and the other outside. They interrogated them separately. After separating the other tribesmen, Mai asked someone to scoop up some water and splash it on the unconscious man. The chilly night stream in the mountains brought back some of the unconscious people's consciousness. When he opened his eyes and saw the other tribesmen surrounding him, he was completely awake. The gazes around him were too intense. They felt like knives, cutting into his body over and over again. He widened his eyes and scanned his surroundings. "I don't know him. I don't know this person. I don't know any of these." The man stared at Xiao Xian with his eyes wide open. He then screamed and scrambled backwards, trying to get as far away from Xiao Xian as possible. "Tell me, why did you follow us into the mountains?" Mai dragged him over and asked. The man looked at the microphone, and then looked at Xiao Xian. He swallowed his saliva and said, "No, we didn't follow you into the forest. In fact, we were already in the forest before you came. We just arrived here a few days ago. Also, we didn't want to enter the forest, so we followed other people." "Others?" Mai looked at the man. "Who?" "The Yi family and the others are all from the royal city," said the man quickly. "Where did you kidnap the tribesmen?" Mai asked again. "Send them." "I don't know." The man glanced at Xiao Xian as he spoke. When he saw Xiao Xian raise his arm at his words, he shivered in fear and hid behind Mai. "I really don't know. We were only responsible for taking them away and handing them over to others. We don't know how they were sent to where." There was no point in quibbling now. These tribesmen had already recognized him. "Are you an organization?" Mai asked. "We're from Bai," said the man. Mai had heard of this name before, but he couldn't remember what it was. Tao Zheng, who was behind him, reminded him. Bai is the largest slave trading organization on the other side of the sea. If this was done by Bai, then the people who were kidnapped might have already been sent to the other side of the sea. The people from Bai had a clear division of labor. The 2 people Xiao Xian caught were just low-level minions, so they didn't know much. "In that case, it's possible that he doesn't know where they were sent to," said Mai. "That's why I said that he doesn't know anything. He's useless, so we'll feed him." "Wait." When the man heard Xiao Xian's calm tone, he suddenly remembered the screams of his companions in the forest. His whole body trembled, and he hurriedly said, "I really do know some important information. Everything I've said is true." Mai stopped Xiao Xian, who was about to step forward. "Wait. We can't find the missing people anyway. Why don't we listen to what he has to say? Yes, yes, yes. I know a lot of important information. I said that the Yi family is looking for treasure. The man repeated what he said to Xiao Xian before, but this time in more detail. Knowing that the Yinjiao people were interested in what he said, the man's heart lit up with hope. However, he didn't dare to keep the Yinjiao people in suspense. He was worried that the Yinjiao people wouldn't be patient enough and would really throw him to the wolves. What? The Yinjiao people wouldn't want to hear it? No, no, no. The Yinjiao people had to hear it. This was very important to his survival. That was why he didn't waste any time. He picked out what he knew and told the Yinjiao people that this information was very important. At the same time, they would know that he had more useful information and couldn't be thrown to the wolves for now. There were many people from the Bai tribe who came because it wasn't easy to attack the central region. They were all clumsy tribes. If they tried to attack one of them, they would have to sacrifice a lot. That was why they targeted the smaller tribes that didn't interact much with the outside world. First, it was easier to attack, and they wouldn't encounter many obstacles. Second, even if the smaller tribes knew that someone had been kidnapped, they wouldn't be able to continue the search. However, they didn't expect that the Flaming River Valley would want to form an alliance before they could even capture enough people. They had a keen sense of danger, so when they heard that the Flaming River Valley wanted to form an alliance, they prepared to retreat. However, at that moment, they received news that the Royal City people had secretly entered the forest. The Royal City people entered the forest from another part of the Flaming River, avoiding the possibility of meeting the Yinjiao people. They were acting so sneakily. There must be some secret they didn't want to tell anyone. Therefore, some of the Bai members who had not captured enough people and were planning to evacuate changed their original plan when they smelled the scent of wealth. They followed the people from King City into the forest and heard some secrets. However, they did not eavesdrop much. They only knew that those people were going into the forest to look for insects, but they did not know what kind of insects they were looking for. However, the Royal City people didn't walk in a straight line. They always took detours, so the Bai people often lost track of them. When they reached this place, they lost track of them. Hence, the Bai people split up to look for the Royal City people. Only the two of them were too lazy to chase after them, so they stayed here temporarily. Who would have thought that they would meet a group of tribesmen hunting in the forest? At first, they wanted to steal something. They didn't really hunt fearsome beasts, so when they smelled the tribesmen barbecued meat, they decided to steal some food at night. However, they thought that they were hiding their whistle, but Changdi recognized them and chased them all the way. After that, they met Xiao Xian and were dragged back by Xiao Xian. After questioning him, Mai temporarily tied the man up and threw him into the cave. He had people watch over him, and if he made any strange movements, they would kill him and feed him to the fearsome beasts. What should we do? Mai asked Xiao Xian when there was no one else around. The Royal City people are here, so it must be true. As for what insect they're looking for in the forest, we don't know, said Xiao Xian. In the past, the people from Rock Hill City entered the forest to look for the green-faced fanged beast to forge weapons. Could the Royal City people be searching in the forest for the same reason? Asked Mai. It's possible. Xiao Xian nodded. If the Royal City people were searching in the forest for precious herbs or important materials for forging weapons, it was very possible. In the forging manual left behind by the Gongjia family, there was mention of using fearsome beast blood to forge weapons. There was also mention of the green-faced fanged beast and a stone-eating insect whose blood was several times more potent than the green-faced fanged beast. At first, Xiao Xian thought it was a stoneworm, but after seeing the king's stoneworm, he dismissed this possibility. That's the only possibility. There could be other reasons, said Mai. In this forest that was probably bigger than Fearsome Beast Forest, the king stoneworm was the most powerful insect Mai knew of. Those people were obviously not looking for the king stoneworm. Looking for the king stoneworm was no different from looking for a death wish. Xiao Xian thought for a moment, then took out a straw rope. He planned to do a knot divination to find out where those people went, and use that to further deduce their intentions. I stood at the side, looking around cautiously, not letting anyone near. Not many people knew about Xiaoxian's divination abilities, and most of them were his own people. However, there were too many untrustworthy outsiders in the team. He did not want others to know about this. After a while, Xiaoxian finished tying the rope. Looking at the knots on the straw rope, Xiaoxian pointed in a direction. Those people are over there. Over there? There doesn't seem to be anything special over there. Maybe what those people from Royal City are looking for is further away. The area that I knew about was in that direction, and there was nothing special about it. The areas further away were beyond his ability. Yinjiao's hunting team had never been there before. After all, the forest was so big, and no one knew where it ended. After thinking for a while, Xiaoxian said to Mai, "You guys continue to lead the team to hunt. There are only a few days left, and they have basically gotten used to this place. The goal of this trip has been achieved. That's enough." "You want to go and take a look?" asked Mai. "Yes. If the people from Royal City are really looking for materials to forge weapons, then that's a good thing," said Xiaoxian. Mai also understood. Ever since the new bronze and metalware came out, he had tasted the benefits. There might be better materials than the green-faced fanged beast in this forest. If he could find out what it was, then it would be good for Yinjiao. Even if it was not a material for forging weapons, it must be a treasure with great uses. They had this forest behind them, even if they could not get it in a short time. As long as they knew what it was and where it was, there would be a chance to get it. "You're alone. Do you need more people?" asked Mai. "No. Caesar will stay with the team. I'll let Cha-Cha take me there." Okay. Although Mai felt that it was too dangerous for Xiaoxian to go alone, it was not the first time Xiaoxian had done this kind of thing. It was not convenient for him to bring more people. Early the next morning, just as the sky was turning bright, an eagle flew out from the team's resting place. Xiaoxian let Cha-Cha go to the direction he got from the divination. Along the way, he divined a few more times. Just like what the person from Bai said, the other party often took detours. It looked like they were going around randomly, but if all the routes were drawn, the general direction would not change. That way, Xiaoxian looked at the route he drew and patted Cha-Cha. "Don't you think that direction is familiar?" "Caw!" Cha-Cha screeched loudly. "Familiar? Of course it was familiar. No one was more familiar with that direction than this mountain eagle, because if they kept going in that direction, they would reach Eagle Mountain." Chapter 784. In the forest, a group of about 500 people was traversing through the forest. A group of armored guards protected a few of them in the middle. Among the people in the middle, there were two people who were dressed particularly conspicuously. The two of them were actually wearing silk clothes with silver patterns that reflected light from time to time. Compared to the sorry state of the others, although the two of them looked tired, they were still considered neat. "Master Qi, how much longer do we need?" asked the leader of the group, turning to the middle. Of the two people who were being protected in the middle, the older one was holding a square plate in one hand. On the square plate were a few pieces of jade. He stroked his beard with the other hand and said, "We will arrive within 10 days. The leader let out a long sigh of relief. That's good. Even though they were prepared, when they really entered this forest, they were almost always on edge and did not have a good night's sleep. They were afraid that they would be eaten by the ferocious beasts hiding in the dark, or be dragged away by those strange plants. This forest was much more dangerous than the forest they had entered on the other side of the sea. When they first entered, there were about 800 of them. Now there were only about 500 left. The remaining 300 had become fertilizer for the plants or food for the fearsome beasts. This was even after they had avoided most of the dangers with the guidance of the 2E family members. If it had not been for the 2E family members, and they had entered the forest alone, the number of people who would still be alive could be counted on one hand. "Let's take a break. There are no major dangers around here," said the man with the plate. The surrounding guards let out a long sigh of relief. They could finally rest. However, Although the Yi family said there were no major dangers, they still had to be careful of the small dangers that could pop up at any moment. If they were too careless, any small danger could cost them their lives. Master Yu, do you really not know what those insects look like? While they were resting, Mu Yao, the leader of the team, asked the only Gongjia member in the team, who was also a master blacksmith. Unfortunately, the new king did not like Gongjiayu. Gongjiayu was not doing too well. If it weren't for the Mu and Yi family's protection, Gongjiayu might not be able to continue living a luxurious life. He might not even be able to find the materials to forge. Not far away, Gongjiayu's hair was all white. He was not young anymore, and used to have a lot of authority in the Gongjia family. Unfortunately, before the new king ascended the throne, Gongjiayu had mocked and ridiculed him. He had never been nice to him. As soon as the new king ascended the throne, he took away many of Gongjiayu's resources and gave them to other Gongjia craftsmen. After all, there was more than one craftsman in the family. The Gongjia family's craftsmen, who worked hard all day, couldn't gather much resources. Most of the resources were given by the nobles of the royal city. Perhaps they could last for a few years, but after a few years, they wouldn't be able to continue. After Gongjiayu lost power, the Mu and Yi family continued to support him. That was why Gongjiayu did not fall into dire straits. The Mu and Yi family's support came with conditions. They hoped that Gongjiayu could make better weapons. Rock Hill City's main target was the Mu and Yi family in the royal city. No wonder the two families were so anxious. They wanted to use this opportunity to win Gongjiayu over. Gongjiayu also planned to use this opportunity to turn things around. He had enjoyed a luxurious life for many years, and it did not feel good to lose power. If he could handle this well, it was not impossible for him to return to his old life. In terms of craftsmanship, Gongjiayu was considered a master. When he was young, he had been to Xia Valley like Heng, and read the secret records left behind by the Gongjia ancestors. That was why he knew what Heng knew. Yinjiao and Rock Hill City had found the green-faced fang beasts, so they knew how good the weapons were. Although it was better than other metal weapons, it was not good enough to satisfy the Mu and Yi family. Since the green-faced fang beasts didn't work, they would try to find the legendary insect. There was very little information in the Gongjia ancestors' notes, but wasn't the Yi family there? As a result, the two sides worked together, and after paying some price, they finally got the location of the insect. Then they gathered people, bypassed the main battlefield by the sea, and avoided the territory of the Flaming Horns tribe, which they had conflicts with before, and came to this forest. I've never seen that insect before. There were only words in the notes, no pictures. Our ancestors called them star butterflies. Gongjiayu had given this answer many times. That was all he could say, because he didn't know what the star butterflies looked like. He didn't even know what the larvae looked like. The only thing I'm sure of is that we need to find the larvae before they turn into butterflies. We need to extract their blood and bring it back. Gongjiayu's eyes flashed with passion. If he could make a better weapon, he would definitely be able to turn the tables around. How many years had it been? No one in the Gongjia family had been able to reproduce the information recorded in the notes. Don't worry, it's still a long time before the larvae turn into butterflies, said Ichi confidently. I'm worried that someone might have followed us. If someone did, wouldn't we be letting them off easy? Plus, the people following us might disrupt our plan. Mu Yao voiced his concern. Don't worry, we've shaken them off. Ichi's face was arrogant. He used his divination abilities to point out the team's location and the time of each mission. They managed to shake off a group of people each time. Now they could no longer sense anyone following them. Sitting next to Ichi was another young man from the Yi family. Strangely, he looked very young, but had white hair at his temples. Unlike Ichi's calmness, he was anxious and uneasy. He had a bad feeling about this. Uncle, we still need to be careful, said the young man. Izong, are you doubting my abilities? Ichi was unhappy with Izong's words. He was about to say something when his brows furrowed. Ignoring everything else, he tapped the plate in front of him. The glowing jade rolled for about 5 minutes before stopping. Master Qi, did something happen? Asked Mu Yao and the rest hurriedly. It's fine. I don't know who stole the Yi family's divination skills. Or maybe it's a piece of trash that escaped from the Yi family. How dare they use divination to find out where we are? Umph. You want to fight me? He scoffed arrogantly, expressing his disdain for the person who tried to find out where they were. Then what now? Wuxia looked at Ichi. That person can no longer find out where we are, said Ichi casually. It's just something the Yi family's juniors do when they're messing around. Someone knows where we are through divination. Izong was shocked. His eyelids twitched as he thought of something. He hurriedly picked up his plate and grabbed a handful of golden sand from a clay bowl held by a slave. He sprinkled it on the plate. The fine golden sand spontaneously separated into stripes on the square plate. At first, it was fine. The fine sand moved normally, either approaching the jade on the plate or avoiding the jade on the plate. However, not long after, this kind of change suddenly stopped. With a soft pu sound, the golden sand in the square plate scattered messily. I can't find out where they are, exclaimed Izong. Usually, if the other party used divination techniques to track them, they could use the Yi family's secret technique to track the other party's location. Of course, they could also stop the other party from following them, just like what Ichi had done earlier. But there was a variable. If the difference in strength between the two parties was too great, it could result in a one-sided suppression. For example, the other party couldn't track them through divination. This was why Izong was shocked. He was already one of the best in the Yi family's younger generation, but he couldn't find out where the other party was. Izong's expression changed. His usually calm face was conflicted. It's like this again. It was as if there was a layer of fog blocking his divination. Every time he tried, the result was a mess. The jade array was very messy, and he couldn't find anything. Izong had experienced this before. It was a terrible memory. Every time he thought back to it, Izong felt like a pair of hands were stopping him from moving forward. In other words, he had hit a bottleneck. In the past, there had been members of the Yi family who had encountered the same situation and couldn't move forward. If they couldn't break through the bottleneck and were stuck at this point, they would stop moving forward for the rest of their lives. The Yi family would also give up on them. Although Izong had encountered the same situation, he was still a rare genius among the younger generation. The Yi family didn't give up on him, and even tried to help him break through. But to no avail. This time, Izong told his family that he was stuck at a bottleneck and couldn't break through. That was why he followed them here. He wanted to take it as a training trip, and hoped to get a chance to break through this bottleneck. He didn't expect to encounter such a situation again. Izong picked up the jade from the square plate, and turned it in his palm, deep in thought. After a while he said to Ichi, "Uncle, can you predict the other party's movements? Are you doubting my ability?" Anger flashed in Ichi's eyes. Izong couldn't divine, because his ability was limited. Ichi was ranked in the top 10 of the Yi family. How could he encounter the same situation as Izong? Izong ignored Ichi's obvious anger and insisted, "Uncle, please do it again." "Fine. I'll do it for you." Ichi suppressed his anger and picked up the jade from the plate to begin the divination. But soon, more and more sweat appeared on Ichi's forehead. His hand holding the jade began to tremble, as if he couldn't hold it steady. Izong's face twitched as he watched from the side. Finally he closed his eyes. He already knew the result of this divination. Poof! The golden sand on the plate scattered. Ichi's face was pale. His fingers were still tightly holding onto the jade, but his eyes were fixed on the remaining golden sand in the square plate, as if he couldn't believe this result. How is this possible? How can this be? Ichi's lips trembled. Not only can we not know where they are, but we also failed to stop them. There was dead silence in the group. Mu Yao and Gong Jiayu stared at Ichi in disbelief. They thought they were hallucinating. What? Even Ichi couldn't track them? Even their attempt to stop them had failed. Did this mean the other party could still track their movements through the divination? Who has this ability? Even you can't stop them. Mu Yao couldn't think of anyone else. Could it be someone else from the Yi family? "I know who it is," said Izong slowly. Compared to the others, Izong was much calmer. The Yi family rarely used the word guess, because they weren't sure of their abilities. Only when they couldn't get a definite result would they say guess. But now, Yizong had said it so calmly. "Who is it?" asked Ichi, ignoring Yizong's choice of words. "It's the Yinjiao man, Yinjiao Shaoxian." "Impossible," Ichi denied immediately. "That's the Yi family's technique. I sensed it just now. I don't know exactly what technique it is, but it's definitely the Yi family's technique. Although I don't know how that person mastered the Yi family's divination technique. I think the person who is tracking our movements through the Yi family's divination technique is Yinjiao Shaoxian." Yizong had suspected that the Yinjiao people had the ability to perform divination back then when he was hunting down the Yinjiao migration team. But at the time, he didn't think it was the Yi family's technique, and guessed that it might be another tribe's divination technique. The Yi family wasn't the only tribe who could perform divination, but the Yi family was definitely the tribe with the strongest divination technique. Now Yizong, who was stronger than him, had already said that it was the Yi family's technique. But Yizong could sense that this was the same situation as the one he encountered back then. Then when the Yinjiao tribe migrated, it was highly likely that the Yi family's divination technique was used. Unfortunately, with his current abilities, he couldn't figure out which technique it was. "Impossible, absolutely impossible," Ichi repeated. He couldn't believe that a tribesman who wasn't part of the Yi family could have this kind of ability. This was a slap to the Yi family's face. If Yizong knew what Ichi was thinking, he would have told him that this slap had already happened back in the royal city. It was just that no one had noticed. "Let's hurry," Mu Yao shouted as he stood up. Since someone already knew where they were, they had to find the larvae and take their blood before they arrived. At this moment in the forest, somewhere far away from Mu Yao's team, Shaoxian looked at the knot in his hand. It wasn't smooth this time. It felt like someone was tugging at the rope to stop him from tying it. But in the end, he still managed to complete it. Calling Cha-Cha, who was pecking at a snake, over, Shaoxian said, "Stop playing. Hurry up and eat. They should know we're coming." "Let's hope they don't do anything rash," Shaoxian said, looking into the distance. He already knew what kind of insect they were looking for. However, the place it lived was too special. It was an important territory for the mountain eagles. Every place where ferocious beasts gathered, there was a delicate balance between the two species. If the balance was broken, would those people be eaten by the huge mountain eagles, or the ferocious beasts, or eaten by the mountain eagles? There seemed to be only one result. Chapter 785. Mu Yao and the rest walked for another 7 days, before they saw a mountain range that looked like a wall blocking the sky. Not only was it long, they could not see the end, it was also very tall. Looking up, they could only see that the top of the mountain range was covered by clouds, as if the mountain range had reached into the clouds. Below the swirling clouds, one could see large areas of the mountain covered in white. The white was ice and snow. Long, steep, high, dangerous. This was what everyone thought when they saw this mountain range. In the past, they had climbed quite a few mountains, but this time, the impact on them was even greater. "This is the first time I've seen a mountain range like this," Mu Yao exclaimed. This was clearly not an ordinary place. It made sense that the star butterfly larva was here. It was only logical for an extraordinary creature to live in an extraordinary place. Thinking of this, Mu Yao felt that the Yi family really did find the larvae. "This is it." Mu Yao turned to ask Ichi. Ichi was still trying to figure out who was following them. He did not believe Yizong's words. He had been thinking about this for the past 7 days. Now that they were at their destination, he was not interested. He gave a perfunctory Mu Yao looked at Yizong. When Yizong nodded, he was overjoyed. "What about the larvae?" "It's not time yet," said Yizong. "Do you mean the larvae will come out on their own?" Mu Yao was curious. "Probably we just have to wait." Yizong had his slaves clear a spot and sat on the rubbed rock. He took out his tray and began to ponder over his doubts like Ichi. Seeing the Yi family like this, Mu Yao did not force them to look for the larvae. The Yi family was always like this, especially the main branch of the Yi family. "Let's see what's around us," Mu Yao said to the rest. Mu Yao was wondering where the larvae were, and how big they were when Gong Jiayu closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He looked like he was enjoying himself inside. Do you smell it? Mu Yao sniffed carefully. The stench of bird poop? Bird poop was not a rare smell in the forest. He had smelled it all the way here. Gong Jiayu opened his eyes and looked at Mu Yao like he was an idiot. The larvae must be here. Why can't I smell it? Mu Yao sniffed again, but could not smell anything else other than bird poop. He turned to look at the rest of them, who shared his confusion. You don't understand. Gong Jiayu looked proud. I can sense excellent forging materials around here. It must be the larvae. Gong Jiayu, Gong Jiayu, Gong Jiayu, Gong Jiayu, you, Gong Jiayu, Gong Jiayu, Gong Jiayu, Gong Jiayu, Gong Jia, Gong Jiayu, Gong Jiayu, you, Gong Jiayu. This was one of the reasons why the Gong Jia ancestors discovered that beast blood could improve forging quality. As he spoke, Mu Yao felt a gust of wind above his head. He looked up to see a black shadow falling towards him. He quickly dodged. Thud! The sound of something heavy falling alerted everyone who was searching for the larvae. They looked towards the source of the commotion warily. There was a huge eagle, several times taller than them, when it laid on the ground. It was like a small mountain. The trees around it had been knocked down. However, it looked heavily injured. Mu Yao looked from the eagle's beak to its feathers to its claws. He concluded an old eagle. It was an old eagle. Although its eyes still had the sharpness of an eagle, its sharp beak and claws, which were supposed to be its powerful weapons, were no longer the same as they were in their glory days. It was as if they were rusty, inferior metal weapons that could no longer be used. Knowing that it was an old and heavily injured giant eagle that couldn't even fly, the threat it posed to them was limited. After seeing the situation clearly, everyone's tense nerves relaxed a little. But then they thought, this is also a good opportunity. An old eagle that was about to die was still a ferocious beast giant eagle. It was good food. They had never hunted such a big eagle before. Mu Yao understood everyone's thoughts when they looked at him. He had the same idea, but to be safe, he asked the Yi family. Will killing the eagle affect the larvae? Asked Mu Yao. Yi looked impatiently at Eagle, who was not far away. Kill him if you want to. Yi Zong fiddled with the jade in his plate. I think it's best not to do that. Why? What did you find? Asked Mu Yao. Yi Zong shook his head. Nothing. Afraid that the others would misunderstand that they couldn't perform the divination because of what happened, Yi explained. There's something strange about this place. We can't perform the divination. You should be able to feel it too. Indeed, Mu Yao knew the Yi family wasn't looking for an excuse. He could feel the pressure from above, like a giant hand was pressing down on him. Since he couldn't perform the divination, Mu Yao didn't want to let go of the meat that was right in front of his mouth. He drew his sword and prepared to kill the eagle. This was where the larvae lived. Eagles and insects didn't seem to coexist peacefully. Killing the eagle might be beneficial to the larvae. The eagle seemed to have sensed Mu Yao's murderous aura. It flapped its wings and looked over, its gaze so sharp that it was hard to look straight at it. A giant eagle of this size had to have been through a lot. Just its gaze was different from the other birds Mu Yao had met on his journey. But the more it was like this, the more Mu Yao wanted to kill it. Old man! The sword light flashed, carrying a cold murderous aura. And without any pause it slashed out. Clang! The giant eagle blocked Mu Yao's attack with its claws. But one of its toes was cut off, pieces of the claw falling off. Just as Mu Yao thought, the eagle's claw was a rusty metal that was about to be obsolete. It couldn't take a single hit. Perhaps, when the eagle was at its peak, the sword might not have been able to cut off the eagle's toes so easily. It might have only been able to cut through the hard scales on the outer layer of the toes. But wasn't the eagle already old? Could an eagle that was about to die of old age return to its youth? The others gathered around. The giant eagle realized that it couldn't stay here any longer. It raised its claw to block Mu Yao's sword and flapped its wings. Crack, 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 crack. The sound of branches snapping could be heard everywhere, as if a rainstorm was falling on the ground. The wind created by the eagle's wings was like a hurricane, slowing Mu Yao's steps. Screech. With a long screech, the giant eagle flapped its wings and took off from the ground. Perhaps due to its old age or its injuries, it seemed much clumsier. Mu Yao thought it would crash down again, but it only flew up, then stopped at a spot on the mountain. Its claws clawed at the steep cliff, but because of its injuries, its claws were no longer sharp and slid down a long distance. Mu Yao considered climbing up the mountain to continue killing it. The eagle didn't look like it had much time left. Just as he was thinking, Gong Jiayu roared, "The star butterfly larvae are out!" Now Mu Yao couldn't care less about the giant eagle. He had more important things to do. He would kill the old eagle after he got the worm blood. Where are they? Mu Yao looked around. I can feel them, they're out. Gong Jiayu breathed heavily, his face flushed. Blood rushed to his face uncontrollably, steam rising from his skin. He held a sword in his hand, his eyes fixed on the ground at the foot of the mountain. In this aspect, he was more sensitive than the Yi family. The Yi family had to perform divination for information, but he did not need to do that. This was the Xia's natural instinct. They're here. As soon as Gong Jiayu finished, Mu Yao heard a rustling sound that seemed to come from underground. Everyone held their breaths, afraid of disturbing the movement. The sound grew louder and louder. Gong Jiayu was looking at the ground near the foot of the mountain. The ground beneath the grass loosened, and the ground protruded. A white round head poked out of the ground and crawled out. Its body was 3 to 4 meters long, and as thick as an adult's thigh. There's more than one. Gong Jiayu grew excited. After the first white worm emerged, other long, snow-white worms emerged one after another near the foot of the mountain. It's them. Chapter 786. White star butterfly larvae crawled out from the ground. Although there were differences in size, there was not a huge difference. One was less than a meter long, while the other was more than 5 meters long. Gong Jiayu was like a hungry beast smelling blood at the sight of this. The excitement in his eyes was palpable, as if he wanted nothing more than to capture all the white worms and let them bleed. It was as if he could see a golden, glorious path laid before him. His chance to turn the tables was right in front of him. Clang! Unsheathing his sword, Gong Jiayu charged towards the nearest worm. Catch them! Mu Yao snapped out of his excitement and ordered his men to get to work. Their ultimate goal was to get these white worms. The sharp blade cut through the white worm's body, but there was no sound of breaking. The sword felt like it had cut through a tree full of resin. The blade seemed to be blocked, only leaving a shallow mark on the worm's skin. Even Mu Yao did not manage to cut through the worm's body as he expected. Just now, he had been able to cut off one of the eagle's toes with his sword, but now, he couldn't even cut off this little white worm. However, although he did not cut the worm in half, he did cut open its skin. White liquid flowed out from the worm's wound, dripping to the ground and seeping into the soil. Just as Mu Yao was about to slash at the opening, the white worm nimbly rolled to the side, avoiding his sword. There were white marks on the ground, blood from the larvae's wounds. However, the blood quickly seeped into the ground. Mu Yao noticed that the larvae's wounds had stopped bleeding and were healing at a visible rate. The speed of their recovery was simply too fast. It was hard to break its skin. It healed quickly and dodged quickly. Although these larvae did not have gaping mouths or sharp horns, they were troublesome to deal with. Someone near Mu Yao noticed this too. He was about to say something to Mu Yao when a white shadow flashed past, fast as lightning. The star butterfly larva that he had just injured had its front end pressed tightly against the ground. Nearly 2/3 of its body had turned into a thick and heavy white whip. Its fierce attack swept towards that person with the power of the wind. That person didn't expect the seemingly harmless white bug to suddenly attack him. Before he could react, an intense pain spread from his abdomen to his brain. The larva hooked its 3 pairs of thoracic legs to the ground, twisting at an unbelievable angle and lashing out. The person who was sent flying directly flew more than 30 meters away. After landing on the ground, he slid back for a distance before stopping. If it weren't for the grass and trees on the ground blocking him, he might have flown even further. After landing on the ground, the man curled up like a shrimp and spat out blood from his mouth. He groaned in pain and could not get up again. Mu Yao dodged the white whip. These white worms were not easy to deal with, but a few more slashes would kill them. Gong Jiayu crouched down and touched the white marks on the ground. They were from the worm he had just injured. He rubbed the soil stained with white blood and suddenly thought, "Don't use it." Gong Jiayu suddenly shouted, "It's not blood." "What do you mean?" asked Mu Yao. "It's not worm blood that can be used for forging," said Gong Jiayu. Mu Yao was confused by Gong Jiayu. "It's not blood? Didn't you say it's worm blood? Are you kidding me? My deepest respect to your ancestors. It's not blood, but it must have something to do with these worms." Gong Jiayu paused. "Use a net. Catch them first." First he would capture the bugs, and then slowly study what exactly they were. Mu Yao's anger subsided when he heard Gong Jiayu. As long as it was the worms, the Gongjia family could figure out if it was blood or not. The net Gong Jiayu mentioned was not made from vines or grass ropes like the tribesmen usually used. It was a net Gong Jiayu made himself before he came. Every thread on the net was a metal that had been specially processed. It was more flexible, but it was not easy to break. The thickness of the thread was less than 1/10 of the thickness of a pinky finger, and it was lighter than other metal of the same size. This made the Mu and Yi family members gasp in amazement. The Gongjia family's masters all had many treasures hidden away. They just did not usually show them to others. Gong Jiayu was only willing to show his treasures because of the larvae. This was his invention. To date, no one else knew how to make this mesh. This was also the trump card Gong Jiayu planned to use to compete with the other blacksmiths for the title of Gongjia's best blacksmith during the Gongjia family's gathering. Unfortunately, he did not make it to the meeting. Instead, the royal city changed, and the Gongjia family was divided into several factions. He was pushed out. At Gong Jiayu's words, one of his slaves opened a large wooden box on his back and took out rolls of animal hide. He opened the hide to reveal a glowing silver net. Mu Yao did not waste any time, tossing the net to someone else. These nets were specially made by Gong Jiayu. Unlike fishing nets, these nets were made to catch worms. Many unnecessary parts were removed to save space and weight. The net wrapped around the front of the white worm's body. The opening of the net tightened, covering the worm's head and the bulge behind its head. The thread connecting the opening of the net was extended and held in the hands of the person who cast the net. They controlled the tightness of the net. The trapped worm did not stop moving. After rolling a few times, it continued to climb towards the mountain wall. It was impossible for one person to pull the white worm. Therefore, each net was pulled by 6 or 7 people or even more. Alternatively, they could tie the net to a nearby tree or rock to save a lot of effort. "Quick, quick, quick! There are more! Catch as many as you can!" shouted Gong Jiayu anxiously. He realized that the worms had no intention of fighting them. Instead, they were heading towards the mountain wall. Many of them had already climbed up the mountain wall and were climbing upwards rapidly. Although Gong Jiayu did not understand worms, this was clearly not a coincidence. There must be a reason. They did not come all the way here to see accidents happen. They had already caught 7 larvae. Some of them went to look for vines and the like. When the larvae got tired of struggling in the metal net, they replaced them with vines. Only then could they free up the metal net to catch more insects. Some of them also had to attract the larvae's attention, so that the person holding the net could cast the net easily. Otherwise, they would not be able to get up immediately after being whipped by the tail. This way, the number of people they could use was limited. Gong Jiayu turned to look at Yi Qi and Yi Zong, who were watching from afar. They each had 4 to 5 slaves with them. Gong Jiayu wanted to ask them to free up a few slaves to help, but the 2 of them looked completely uninterested in catching worms. Both of them were frowning as they stared at the trays in their hands, ignoring the battle. Gong Jiayu swallowed the words he was about to say. Forget it, he could not count on them. Weren't the Yi family also in a hurry to find more powerful weapons before coming here? Why did they not seem to care now that they were here? We brought too few people. However, they were not sure if they could find what they were looking for, so they did not bring too many people. They thought they would only find 1 or 2 larvae. Now Gong Jiayu regretted it. If he knew there would be so many larvae, he would have brought an army. Although there were many larvae, they were not all in the same place. They were scattered far apart. This was one of the reasons why they were not very efficient at catching worms. Quick! 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 Gong Jiayu could not stand still when he saw all the worms running up the cliff. He sheathed his sword and climbed up the cliff. Mu Yao and the rest did the same. They planned to get the worms down and let the people with the nets catch them. However, they soon discovered that the mountain walls here were not that easy to climb. They were colder and harder than the mountain walls in other places. Furthermore, the higher they climbed, the more difficult it was to climb. It was as if there was a force pressing down on any creatures that tried to climb up. However, the white worms crawling up the mountain did not seem to feel the pressure. Their backs arched into the shape of omega, then climbed up into the shape of 1, and then arched into the shape of omega. There were 3 pairs of legs on their chest, abdomen, and tail. The hooked legs allowed the clumsy white worms to climb up the mountain wall. In comparison, Mu Yao and the rest who were chasing after them paled in comparison. This was not going to work. The worms were faster than them. If they continued, they would be left behind. Gong Jiayu also realized this problem. He looked at the cliffs on both sides and fixed his gaze on one spot. That fat one. Mu Yao looked over. There was a white worm not far away. Although it was about the same length, it was obviously thicker than the rest. The other worms curled into a circle, while it curled into a ball. It had a lot of flesh and blood and crawled slower than the rest. Who else could they catch? They might even be able to make it roll down the cliff with a flick of their sword. That's it. Catch that fat one. There were too many targets, and they had limited manpower. These star butterfly larvae were not easy to catch either, so they had to catch them one by one. Perhaps sensing Mu Yao's intentions, the fat worm sped up, preventing Mu Yao and the rest from catching up. In the end, they gave up on chasing the fat worm. When they reached a suitable place to rest, they would stop to replenish their food and water, and recover their energy before continuing their climb. From time to time, they would encounter cliff-like mountain walls. If they could climb, they would climb directly. If they couldn't, they would take a detour and find a less steep place. Mu Yao looked up. They had climbed a long distance. Any higher, and the cliffs were covered in snow. They could not see any greenery, and the peak of the mountain was still out of sight. All they could see were swirling clouds. A gust of cold air rushed into their lungs, almost choking them. The wind was stronger and colder, but they were not even halfway up the mountain. If they continued, they would encounter even colder conditions. Mu Yao looked at Gong Jiayu. He knew Gong Jiayu would not give up. He did not want to either. It was rare for them to be here, especially in a situation like this. Even if they could not catch more worms, if they could find out why they were climbing, perhaps they could discover more secrets or treasures. It would be worth it. Didn't they say there were treasures in mysterious and dangerous places like this? Mu Yao's blood boiled at the thought. The rest of them thought the same, but no one complained. Although it was cold, their gazes were fervent. Treasures? What kind of treasures would there be? On the way here, they had hunted many ferocious beasts, and the animal skins they were wearing were the fur of those prey. However, gradually, the thick animal skins on their bodies began to be covered in white frost. Moreover, the higher they climbed, the greater the area covered by the frost. Their hair and beards were also not spared. How high is the peak? Mu Yao sighed. Just as he was thinking, he felt a strong gaze on him. He turned and saw an eagle resting on a cliff about 100 meters away. It was the one he had killed on the ground. But Mu Yao's target was the worms. He wasn't interested in the eagle for now. He glanced at it and continued climbing. But the eagle's gaze was too intense, making Mu Yao furious. What are you looking at? I'll chop your head off if you keep looking. Mu Yao roared at it. With that, the eagle stared at Mu Yao even more intensely. Mu Yao's temper flared up. Since they were all hungry, they might as well kill an eagle halfway and eat something before continuing their climb. He was about to order his subordinates to move when he heard an eagle's cry. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind blew from above, causing small pebbles to fall from the cliff. Mu Yao and the rest squinted from the wind. They looked up to see an eagle perched on the cliff not far above them, clinging tightly. It was much smaller than the eagle, but still huge compared to a human. It was not an eagle. It looked young. Its beak was not as curved as the eagle's, and its claws were sharp and powerful. However, Mu Yao's attention was not on the eagle. He looked up at a protruding rock. There was a person standing there. A tribesman? Asked Mu Yao. Yinjiao. Gongjia thought the person looked familiar. Mu Yao's eyes flashed when he remembered what the Yi family said. You're Xiaoxian from the Yinjiao tribe? Mu Yao was not part of the main force when they hunted down the Yinjiao tribe, so he had never seen what Xiaoxian looked like. He only guessed based on what the Yi family said. Yi Zong and Yi Qi said someone was following them. Yi Zong even said confidently that the person was Yinjiao Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian did not answer them directly. Instead he said, "You're brave, how dare you fight here?" Mu Yao raised his brows, wary of Xiaoxian. Can't we? Xiaoxian glanced at them. This is the giant eagle's land of faith. Mu Yao and the rest were stunned. Xiaoxian did not look like he was lying to them. Giant eagle? What the hell was land of faith? Wasn't this the star butterfly's territory? A giant eagle? How old was a giant eagle? Like the one just now. Just as he thought of the eagle, Mu Yao realized that it was resting on the mountain wall. It flapped its wings and flew up. Before it flew up, it glanced at Mu Yao. The talons with two broken toes moved a little. Then it looked back up, no longer looking down. Mu Yao felt like he understood the eagle's gaze the moment their eyes met. It was saying, "Just you fucking wait." Chapter 787. Mu Yao stared at Xiaoxian in shock. It wasn't that he doubted Xiaoxian's claim, that this was the giant eagle's land of worship. He knew that Xiaoxian was on a different side from them, and had conflicts with them before. Before Yinjiao crossed the sea, they were hunted down by the royal city's army. Most of their team had participated in the hunt. Even those who weren't directly involved did so indirectly. Yi Zong, who hadn't climbed up the mountain, was also a direct participant. It would be strange if Xiaoxian treated them well. That was why Mu Yao's guard was up. If even the Yi family couldn't stop this tribesman, what was he after? Just to warn them? Looking at the surrounding environment and terrain, they were on a steep hillside. There were many mountain walls that were almost perpendicular to the ground. If they were not careful, they could directly roll down the mountain. Xiaoxian chuckled at their wary gazes. I'm not the one you should be wary of. Mu Yao did not say anything, but he thought to himself, who else can I guard against? You must be hoping for all of us to die. If Mu Yao was in Xiaoxian's shoes, he would have thought the same. That was why he did not let his guard down. Instead, he stared at Xiaoxian even more cautiously. It's about to begin. Xiaoxian looked up at the sky. There was no angry roar, no murderous intent in his eyes. Xiaoxian's tone was calm, but it sent chills down Mu Yao's spine. He panicked for no reason. He looked up and saw clouds that looked like they were within reach. A chill seeped into his lungs, sending chills down his spine. It was even more chilling than before, as if something terrible was about to happen. Cha-Cha, who was beside Xiaoxian, did not pay much attention to Mu Yao and the rest. It looked up instead. Since Cha-Cha had been to Eagle Mountain twice in a row, there was no need for him to go there again. But that didn't stop him from looking forward to it. When he sensed what was about to happen, he was so excited that he wanted to howl. The yang guang in the sky was actually very strong. If they weren't here, yang guang could be felt from somewhere else in the forest. Even though the mountain was covered by clouds, there was still light shining through them. It was as if the sun could be seen through the thick clouds. Gongjia noticed that the star butterfly larvae had changed too. He couldn't see them clearly because they were too far away, but he kept his eyes on the fat worm behind the swarm. Otherwise, he wouldn't have noticed the white worms in the snow. At that moment, the star butterfly worms stopped climbing. They were changing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Their bodies shrank and flattened. The white worms in the snow gradually merged with the snow. They looked like a mass of snow that was similar to the snow around them. Below a protruding rock on the mountain wall, a star butterfly worm clung to it like a ball of snow. If one didn't consider the logic behind why there would be snow under the rock, the transformation was shocking. This was the natural instinct of the star butterfly worm. Just like how creatures in the forest would disguise themselves when faced with a threat, these star butterfly worms were the same. They sensed danger. Even Gongjia, who didn't know much about insects, felt chills run down his spine. The fear of uncertainty was enough to push his heart into his throat. It was dead silent. The entire mountain range seemed to have fallen into silence. Everyone's breathing became cautious, only the sound of the wind whistling in their ears. Suddenly, the clouds above began to swirl, as if something was blowing them. Screech! The cry of an eagle that seemed to come from beyond the heavens rang out from above. Then, more eagle cries rang out, as if they were very far away, but also as if they would arrive in the next moment. It was a giant eagle's cheer. The clouds above rolled even more violently, as if there were strong gusts of wind blowing from above, spreading to the surroundings, trying to blow away the thick clouds that were blocking their line of sight. Screech, screech! The eagles' cries were getting closer, right above their heads. Mu Yao and the rest had been staring up nervously, their eyes wide and mouths agape. They were shocked by what they saw, but did not dare to make a sound. Above their heads, in the thick layer of clouds, which was brightly illuminated by the sun, there were large swathes of shadows moving. The airflow from above finally blew away part of the clouds. The sunlight released the golden light that had been brewing for a long time, like sharp swords that broke through the clouds, and were thrown into places that had been blocked by the clouds for a long time, opening up a brighter world. But soon, the light was blocked again. This time, it was not the thick clouds that blocked Yongguang's view, but several large figures. Unlike the old eagle Mu Yao had seen earlier, these figures were like newly awakened predators, eager to set the bloody rules of the hunt. Mu Yao thought the eagle he saw earlier was already a giant eagle, but now, he finally understood what Xiao Xian meant when he said giant and giant eagle. The eagle from before, even if placed in the group of eagles above, was only an ordinary one. Giant beast. Real giant beasts. According to legends, giant beasts ruled the world in an even more distant era. But for some reason, the giant beasts that once ruled the world and pushed humans to the bottom of the food chain disappeared one by one. Only then did the humans who lived in the dark usher in a new era. Disregarding its strength, just its body size alone was enough to make it a true giant beast. In the past, he had thought that the ferocious beasts he had seen in the forest were already large in size. However, compared to what he was seeing now, they were not even worth mentioning. This was the first time he saw a true giant beast, and a group at that. They seemed to be mocking Mu Yao for his short-sightedness. The huge figures easily stirred the clouds with their powerful wings. They soared in the sky as if they were born in the clouds. Looking down on everything. Looking down on everything. That was the source of all the fear in Mu Yao's heart. What did the tribesman say? This was the giant eagle's land of faith? What else did he say? You shouldn't be wary of me? Mu Yao's heart skipped a beat. He only had one thought. Don't let the giant eagles discover them. Just as he thought this, Mu Yao heard something whirring in the air. Several figures flew in from above, drawing an arc in the air before crashing into the mountain wall where Mu Yao and the others were resting, exploding. The rocks on the mountain wall didn't crack, nor did Mu Yao and the others suffer much damage. Just some noise. Bang 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 bang. Clap clap. Thud. Each thud was louder than the last. Mu Yao. He wanted to curse the Yinjiao ancestors. When he looked up again, he saw a much smaller eagle flying out of the clouds that had yet to completely disperse. It swept its gaze across the mountain wall and flew towards the source of the sound. Soon after, more and more eagles broke through the clouds, which had dissipated a lot, and flew over. The younger giant eagles were more curious. They were so excited that they had nowhere to vent their energy. When they heard the sound below, they followed the sound. Behind the small eagles, there were a few eagles that were slightly larger than them. Then, a few eagles with a strong herd mentality also came down. Treacherous, cunning, shameless, Mu Yao cursed. Xiao Xian was the one who threw the things that made the noise. If they weren't running for their lives, Mu Yao would have cursed even more. Facing the incoming eagles, Mu Yao and the others drew their swords. The sharp blades clashed against the eagles' claws. Just as Mu Yao had expected, these eagles were different from the ones he'd met before. Their claws seemed to be covered in a layer of hard armor. Even if they hit, they couldn't easily cut off a toe. Plus, Mu Yao and the others didn't have any divine weapons. The situation was even more disadvantageous for them. Seeing that they were using weapons, the eagles became even more ferocious. They weaved through the air, using their sharp beaks and claws to attack those with weapons. Some people were directly taken away by the giant eagles, eaten, or thrown down from the sky. Whether they could survive or not depended on their luck. Xiaoxian quietly watched as the people fled in panic after being attacked by the giant eagle. Treacherous, cunning, shameless. Why didn't the royal city say that when they attacked Yinjiao? Xiaoxian had no intention of attacking for now. Not all eagles were like the Cha-Cha or the Hui tribe's eagles. Some hated humans too. Xiaoxian didn't want to attract attention now. That was why he didn't go out even when he saw people escaping the eagles' attacks. Instead, he hid behind a rock and watched. Below, at the foot of the mountain. This is where the eagles are, Yizong said, looking up. The tribesmen are taking revenge. Ichi stared at the sky. He couldn't see clearly because of the distance and divination didn't work here. But he could guess what was happening. Those giant eagles were too conspicuous, and they made the humans look small and insignificant. Then you have to be careful. You were at the front of the team that chased after the flaming horns. Tribesmen are vengeful. Mu Yao and the others couldn't avoid it, so you can't either, Ichi said expressionlessly. He didn't gloat or worry over this. It was as if he was just chatting. Compared to what he cared about, none of this was important. Yizong smiled bitterly. What's coming will come. No one can avoid it. This sentence seemed to be referring to the current situation, but it also seemed to be a metaphor for something else. After Ichi heard it, he did not refute, but only sighed heavily. He wanted to lament, wanted to curse, but did not know what to say. But soon, his conflicted eyes became firm, and he sighed softly in agreement. Indeed, what should come, even if it is late for so many years, will still come. No one can avoid it. If it is not us, it will be our descendants. Why don't we bear it? As he spoke, there was the sound of rocks sliding down the cliff. A figure rolled down the cliff and landed on the ground. He didn't even have time to check his injuries before he scrambled to his feet and ran away from the foot of the mountain. Retreat! He still remembered the eagle whose 2 toes he had cut off. To be on the safe side, he decided to leave first. There were too many giant eagles here. What would he do if the eagle who had a grudge against him came with reinforcements? Wait for death. As long as he knew this was the larvae's nest, even if he failed this time, he could come back next time. As long as he was alive, there was a chance he could come again. Xiaoxian did not tell Mu Yao that although this was a place of worship for the giant eagles, it was not their nests. The eagles that entered Eagle Mountain had to wait a long time before coming out. Some eagles did not even come out after entering. When Mu Yao passed by Ichi and Yizong, he saw that they didn't intend to move. He shouted, "Are you stupid? Why aren't you running? You guys go ahead. We're not leaving," Yizong said. Mu Yao stopped, looking at Yizong in disbelief. "What did you say?" "We're staying here for now," Yizong said calmly. Mu Yao wanted to pull his ears and tell himself he'd misheard. He wanted to pry open Yizong's head and see if it was filled with bird shit. He looked at Yizong. "You're not leaving too?" Yizong had said we. Ichi didn't want to waste time. He flung his sleeves and walked back to where he'd been sitting. Mu Yao was so angry he wanted to kill them. The Yi family was crazy. So what if they didn't leave? He didn't want to die here with them. "Retreat!" Mu Yao shouted, and fled with those who could still run. There were close to 500 of them when they arrived, but not even a tenth of them left. Some of them were those who had stayed at the foot of the mountain. Almost everyone who followed Mu Yao up the mountain was wiped out. Mu Yao was almost taken away by a giant eagle, but in the nick of time, he threw Gong Jiayu out to block the claw for him. At that moment, the master and his weapon were no longer important. Nothing was more important than his own life. In the sky, there were many eagles circling, searching for humans. Yizong and Ichi watched from the forest, relieved that the eagles didn't like to eat on the ground. Even if they did, they would bring their prey to higher ground. Yizong and Ichi's slaves paled when they heard the screams. Their muscles tensed. The slightest movement in the leaves made their hair stand on end. In contrast, Yizong and Ichi were calm, as if they did not hear the thuds of the people thrown by the eagle. They did not hear the screams and cries for help. They stared intently at their trays, as if nothing could distract them. Everything around them calmed down. The eagle's cries grew distant, and the people's cries stopped. Rustle, rustle, rustle. The sound of rustling grass followed by footsteps approached. Yizong and Ichi, who had been staring at the plates, moved their attention away from the plates and looked at the newcomer. Their eyes swept over the other party's animal hide armor, an oddly colored broadsword. Shaoxian of Yinjiao? The blade flashed with a cold light, as if it carried the cold breath of metal. Yizong and Ichi's slaves tensed up and guarded them. They watched vigilantly as Shaoxian walked towards them. You were among the people who hunted down the Yinjiao migration team, right? Shaoxian looked at Yizong. Although his tone was a question, there was certainty in it. Yizong took a deep breath and pushed aside the two slaves in front of him. Give me 3 days. After 3 days, you can do whatever you want with me. Chapter 788. 3 days. Shaoxian didn't know why they didn't leave with Mu Yao, nor did he know why Yizong said 3 days, but why? Shaoxian looked at the two Yi family members not far away. In the forest, wolves don't give giant antlered deer any time to catch their breath. No, these 3 days are for us in Yinjiao. Yizong's expression didn't change. In 3 days, the Yi family will fight to the death with Yixiang. I don't think I need to explain who Yixiang is. Shaoxian raised an eyebrow. Of course he knew who Yixiang was. Rock Hill City was where it was today mainly because of Yixiang. And Yixiang had always been called bad luck by the Yi family. Shaoxian pointed at Yizong, and Yizong with his free hand. You. Then he pointed to the ground. Here. He pointed in the direction of the desert. Fight Yixiang? How were they going to fight from so far away? Also, Yizong had said the Yi family. Not us or me. Did that mean the entire Yi family was going to fight? They were so far away. The Yi family wouldn't all head to the desert. How were they going to fight? Seeing Shaoxian's confusion, Yizong explained slowly, as if he was sure that Shaoxian wouldn't kill them now. The Yi family's way of fighting is different from other tribes. Ichi lifted his chin slightly at Yizong's words, his face filled with obvious arrogance. He seemed to despise the way other tribes fought. Fighting with blades at the slightest disagreement was barbaric. How vulgar. How could they compare to the Yi family? How different. Shaoxian's interest was piqued. The Yi family had always been a special group. They didn't have much fighting ability, nor were they as strong as other tribes. However, they were one of the 6 noble families in the royal city. If I tell you, will you give us 3 days? Yizong asked. Sure. Shaoxian could afford to wait for 3 days. Yizong was relieved to hear Shaoxian agree. As long as Shaoxian agreed, 3 days would be enough. Sitting back down on the animal hide cushion the slaves had laid out, Yizong said, The Yi family have never believed in pure physical strength. Shaoxian knew that the Yi family could kill people without leaving a trace. They could even create all sorts of accidents without anyone knowing why. The abilities of the Yi family's ancestors were not limited to the world you can see. Yizong looked into the sky with admiration and respect. You will not be able to see the duels between the Yi family members. Distance is not an obstacle for the truly powerful. Just like how you can see what is happening in faraway places. Can't see? Shaoxian had wanted to watch the duel between the Yi family members and see if he could learn more from it, so that he could improve his not divination skills. However, Yizong said that he wouldn't be able to see it. I don't know how you know the Yi family's divination skills, but you are not a member of the Yi family. Even if you can grasp part of the divination skills, you won't be able to access the core knowledge. That knowledge can only be accessed through the inheritance of the Yi family. Also, it is related to the power of the fire seed, Yizong said. Kid, what kind of divination skills are you using from the Yi family? Ichi couldn't help but ask. He still couldn't believe that the person who had been using divination skills to track them was really this tribesman. If I tell you, will you tell me how to watch the duel? Shaoxian asked. You can't. If you want to see what normal people can't, You must know the core knowledge that Izong mentioned. You can't do that. Even if someone tells you how to do it, you won't be able to do it. Because you don't have the blood of the Yi family in you. Ichi said with certainty. Without the blood of the Yi family, he wouldn't be able to use the power of the fire seed in his bloodline. He wouldn't be able to access the core knowledge, let alone watch the duel between the Yi family and the Yi family on another level. The fire seed again? Then how do you know the Yi family is going to fight? Did you get the information from divination? 3 days? Because the duel will start in 3 days? Xiaoxian asked. These people had been in the forest for so long. How did they get such accurate information? That's right. Izong nodded. Although Xiaoxian had done divination before, he didn't know what the Yi family was up to. Maybe this was the difference between the Yi family and the Yi family? Besides, other than knots, Xiaoxian didn't know anything about the Yi family. You should be able to feel that there's a force here that's affecting our divination. We can't divine anything else, but we can divine anything about the Yi family. There will definitely be a duel in 3 days. Izong said. Something was affecting the divination? Xiaoxian hadn't noticed anything. He had just done a divination on the hunting team. Although there were some obstacles, they could still continue. Of course, Xiaoxian didn't mention any of this. In 3 days, Izong only briefly told Xiaoxian about Yixiang and the upcoming duel with the Yi family. After that, he and Ichi focused on preparing for the duel. This was a good place. Perhaps because it was close to Eagle Mountain, there weren't any threatening fearsome beasts nearby. The eagles rarely rested at the foot of the mountain. No wonder Izong and Ichi didn't leave with Mu Yao and the others. Even if they had 3 days, they wouldn't be able to leave this forest. They didn't know if they could find a better place. That was why they decided to stay here and prepare for the duel. The war had come so suddenly that they had not expected it either. They had originally planned to search for better forging materials with the Mu family to deal with the trouble in the desert, but they had not expected the war to suddenly draw closer. They no longer needed to catch the star butterfly insects, because there was no longer a need. Even if they could catch them and forge better weapons, the war would have already ended by then. Izong and Ichi had said 3 days, but on the second day, their expressions changed drastically. They ordered their slaves to guard the area, while they took out the tray, jade stones and golden sand they had prepared. Just like a divination, they placed the jade stones on the tray according to a certain pattern. Then they sprinkled the fine golden sand on the tray. Every time their fingers moved the jade stones, the sand would change. Xiaoxian looked over. Izong and Ichi ignored everything around them, their eyes fixed on the changes in the jade stones and sand. It was as if the tray was everything. They weren't afraid that Xiaoxian would see this. In their hearts, Xiaoxian wasn't a member of the Yi family. Even if he saw what they were doing, even if he was gifted and could understand some of the mysteries, he wouldn't be able to touch the unseen plane of the world. Seeing what others couldn't see had always been the reason why the Yi family thought they were better than others. In the square plate, the golden sand moved on its own despite the absence of wind. One moment, it was moving in this direction, and the next moment, it changed directions. The jade stone seemed to have created an invisible force to move the fine sand. The hand that moved the jade stone seemed to be moving very slowly, because every time he blinked, he seemed to see a hand stop there, not moving at all, but also seemed to be moving very fast. Around the hand were shadows, and the jade stone and the golden sand were moving. Something was fermenting rapidly. The waves of energy became faster and faster. Izong and the slaves around Ichi couldn't help but take a step back. Then another step, then another step. They moved even further away from the two. The sudden increase in energy around the two gave them a lot of pressure. Whoosh! An orange-red flame mixed with white light suddenly appeared. It drew an arc in the ground in front of Ichi, forming an arc of fire. On the outer side of the arc of fire, there was a ball of fire. The top of the flame was mostly orange-red, while the bottom was white. The flame was almost as tall as a person. On the other side of the arc of fire, Ichi sat there. Behind him, there were 3 shadows. They seemed to be illuminated by the flame, flickering along with the dancing flames on the other side of the arc of fire. The ball of fire actually illuminated 3 shadows. The flame of the fire seed. The ball of fire that appeared was the flame of the fire seed that merged with the E family's bodies. The flame that appeared, the arc of fire drawn by the flames on the ground, and the three shadows, formed the shape of the E family's totem. This was the E family's totem, which used to be the E tribe's totem. Xiaoxian had seen the E family's totem in many places in the royal city. The aristocrats in the royal city no longer called it a totem, but a clan emblem. Carriages, shops, and mansions all had such a totem. But Xiaoxian never knew that the E family's totem would appear in this form. Yizong was one step slower, but the same thing happened to him. Xiaoxian finally understood what they meant when they said they had 3 days. The battle was bound to happen within 3 days. And as long as the 2 members of the E family were in this state, Xiaoxian wouldn't be able to make a move easily. This was because the power of the fire seed was very effective in protecting the 2 of them, just like how the fire pit protected the tribe in the past. The power of the fire seed was a form of protection, and the E family was able to maximize the power of this protection. It was much stronger than what Xiaoxian felt from the Yinjiao people. It was fine when they were far away, but as soon as they were within 10 steps of them, they would feel a strong repulsive force with every step. This was why the slaves around the 2 of them kept retreating, because they couldn't stand close to the 2 of them at all. Moreover, Yizong and Yiqi were sitting very close to each other. The power of the fire seed had a superimposed effect, so the repulsive force towards those who weren't from the E family was even stronger. The battle with the E family definitely wouldn't last for just 1 or 2 days. The 2 of them had said they would have 3 days, probably because they wanted to stall for time. They didn't want to waste their power before the battle started, so they had to deal with Xiaoxian first. Once they were fully prepared for battle, the protective shield of the fire seed would be activated. You think I can't make a move just because you're borrowing the power of the fire seed? Xiaoxian laughed. Yizong and Yiqi probably expected that he wouldn't make a move at a time like this. The battle between the E family and Yixiang was actually a good thing for the Yinjiao tribe. After all, the Yinjiao didn't like either side. Moreover, Yizong might have analyzed Xiaoxian's style of doing things and all kinds of situations, so he felt that it was more likely that Xiaoxian wouldn't make a move. That was why he was so calm. However, Yizong definitely didn't expect that Xiaoxian wasn't afraid of the repulsive force of the fire seed at all. He could also withstand the pressure from the 2 of them, but Xiaoxian didn't plan on killing them right now. Xiaoxian looked at Yizong and Yiqi, who were surrounded by totemic flames. He found another spot and told Cha-Cha to keep an eye on the surroundings while he took out a straw rope. Couldn't watch the battle with the Yi family? How would he know if he didn't try? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.